Tonight, we're exploring the complete lore of Mewtwo's clones, how many actually exist, and what they all did. I know this is a tantalizing topic, but don't worry, I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment day 1. Now let's get back to the video. Deep in the shadows of the Kanto region, nestled within the sterile, cold walls of a laboratory on New Island, a question was asked that would forever alter the fabric of the Pokémon world. It was a question not of what could be done, but of what should be done. For decades, fans across the globe have looked into the piercing, purple eyes of Mewtwo and seen a monster, a god, a victim, and a king. But Mewtwo was never truly alone. Before the first psychic blast leveled the laboratory at Cinnabar, before the storm clouds gathered to summon the world's greatest trainers, and long before the concept of a legendary Pokémon was even understood by the masses, there were others. There were those who came before, those who stood beside, and those who were left behind in the dark, swirling fluids of a glass cylinder. Tonight, we are stepping away from the bright lights of the Pokémon League and the cheerful music of Pallet Town. We are descending into the quiet, heavy history of the cloning project, a narrative thread that is perhaps the darkest and most philosophically complex story ever told in this universe. When we talk about Mewtwo, we often focus on the singular entity, the one who defied its creators and sought to prove its own worth through power. But the true scope of this story is far wider. It is a story of a father's grief, a scientist's obsession, and a psychic entity's desperate search for a family that was taken from it before it even had the chance to speak. How many clones actually exist? Is it just the handful in the films, or does the lore suggest a much larger, more tragic number? From the failed experiments of Dr. Fuji to the massive army of the cloned starters, and even the mysterious appearance of a second Mewtwo years later, the count is higher than many realise. We aren't just looking at numbers on a page or sprites in a game. We are looking at the biological echoes of Mew, the legendary ancestor of all Pokémon, and the ethical wreckage left in the wake of humanity's desire to play God. Think back to the first time you saw those strange black markings on the skin of a Charizard, or the way a Pikachu looked at its original counterparts with eyes filled with a confusing mixture of hatred and recognition. There is a deep, unsettling sadness to the existence of these creatures. They were born into a world that told them they were nothing more than copies, reflections in a broken mirror with no right to exist on their own terms. And yet, through the chaos of their creation, they carved out a legacy that challenges everything we know about life and the soul in the Pokémon world. In this deep dive, designed for those who want to lose themselves in the lore as they drift off to sleep, we will painstakingly reconstruct the timeline of the cloning experiments. We will explore the secret logs of the Fuji project, where a young girl named Amber became the catalyst for the greatest scientific achievement and the greatest tragedy in Team Rocket's history. We will analyse the specific Pokémon that Mewtwo chose to replicate, the unique traits that separated them from their natural-born counterparts, and the ultimate fate of the survivors who sought refuge in the clouds of Mount Quain. This is more than a list of statistics. This is a journey through the evolution of a soul. We will examine the differences between the clones created by human hands and those created by Mewtwo itself, exploring why some were destined to fade away while others became powerful enough to challenge the very foundations of nature. We will look at the manga, the movies, and the subtle clues hidden within the games, connecting dots that span over 25 years of storytelling. Why did Dr. Fuji risk everything for a memory? Why did Giovanni believe he could control a force that surpassed the divine? And what does it mean for a creature to be born without a past, only to be forced to fight for a future it was never supposed to have? These are the mysteries that haunt the fringes of the Pokémon world. And tonight, we are going to uncover every single one of them. So settle in. Let the world outside fade away as we travel back to the beginning, to a quiet island, a grieving father, and the first heartbeat of a creature that would change everything. From the 5 original subjects of the Cinnabar experiments to the hidden survivors of the Johto wilderness, this is the complete, definitive lore of Mewtwo's clones. Deep in the shadows of Cinnabar Island's smouldering volcano, a network of concealed laboratories hummed with the cold pulse of unchecked ambition. These weren't the bustling gyms where trainers tested their mettle against Blaine's fiery trials. No, these were buried chambers, carved into the island's rugged basalt, far from prying eyes where scientists crossed lines no ethical code had ever dared to draw. Here, in the ethical void of Cinnabar's underbelly, the air hung thick with the sterile tang of chemicals and the faint, metallic whisper of life support systems straining against nature's unbreakable rules. Picture the dim glow of bioluminescent tanks lining obsidian walls, their surfaces etched with frost from cryogenic fluids. No oversight body watched these halls, no international Pokémon League, no governmental review board. Just a cadre of brilliant minds, isolated by the island's perpetual ash clouds, convinced their genius justified defying the essence of creation itself. They toyed with DNA strands pulled from the dawn of time, blurring the boundary between extinct myth and manufactured reality. Pokémon weren't partners here. They were raw material, reduced to swirling vials and genetic blueprints. And humans? Mere footnotes in the experiment's ledger. Their humanity as expendable as a failed petri dish. It began with a discovery that should have humbled them. A fossil unearthed from the rain-soaked jungles of Guyana, half a world away. Smugglers, driven by whispers of ancient power, chipped it from a cavern wall where time itself had fossilized a single, Yushas iridescent cilium. That tiny eyelash belonged to Mew, the ancestral Pokémon, progenitor of all species, a ghost from prehistory whose DNA encoded the very alphabet of life. The fossil arrived in Cinnabar under cover of night, crated in reinforced alloy, its surface humming with latent energy that made lab instruments glitch and flicker. Scientists clustered around it in the dead of night, their faces illuminated by the fossil's eerie inner light, breaths shallow with awe. This wasn't just bone, it was a key to godhood, promising to unlock evolutions beyond nature's wildest dreams. From that relic sprang the Mew Project, a venture born of sheer hubris, bankrolled by shadows even deeper than the labs themselves. The project's architects dreamed of surpassing Mew, not merely cloning it, but engineering something superior, a being forged in artificial wombs to eclipse its primordial source. They spoke in hushed tones of perfection through iteration, of purging the frailties that evolution had tolerated for eons. Tanks multiplied like veins through the rock, filled with nutrient soups bubbling under ultraviolet lamps. Early tests yielded grotesque parodies, limbs that twisted wrong, eyes that never opened, forms that dissolved back into primordial ooze before a single cry could escape. Yet failure only fueled their fire. Each collapse was data, each disintegration a step closer to triumph. They ignored the warnings, the seismic rumbles from the volcano above, as if the earth itself recoiled, the nightmares that plagued the staff. Visions of spectral forms clawing at tank glass. The labs echoed with the soft whir of sequencers mapping Mew's genome, de-strand by helix, revealing secrets no living creature had glimpsed. They spliced it with enhancements, hardier cells from Tauros herds, neural boosters from Alakazam brains, convinced they could outdo the creator. Protocols blurred, safety overrides were disabled to hasten births. In those pressurized chambers, the line between science and sorcery vanished. Pokémon dragged from the wild became unwilling donors, their essences harvested in sterile bays, while sedated cries faded into ventilation shafts. The ethical void deepened with every log entry, every discarded prototype flushed into volcanic vents. No one questioned the cost, not when the promise of a new apex predator dangled so close. Nights stretched into weeks, the island's heat seeping through reinforced concrete, turning the air soupy and oppressive. Monitors cast pallid blue hues on faces gaunt from sleepless vigils. The fossil's glow dimmed as its secrets were consumed, but the project's momentum surged unchecked. Whispers spread among the staff of a breakthrough, a viable embryo stabilizing in the prime tank, its form coalescing with unnatural speed. They named it in private, a suffix to honor its lineage, but hubris whispered louder. This would be no mere echo of Mew. It would be the machine's ghost, a synthetic soul to haunt the world above. As the tanks thrummed louder, masking the subtle cracks in their resolve, one man's hidden sorrow began to bleed into the project. A grief so profound, it would twist the lab's sterile heart into something far more human and far more tragic. That story unfolds next in Dr. Fuji's Forbidden Grief, where a father's desperation ignites the spark that awakens the machine's rage. From the sterile glow of those Cinnabar Island labs, where the Mew project's arrogance first took root, emerged a figure whose ambition was no mere scientific gamble. It was born from a father's shattered heart. Dr. Fuji, the brilliant mind hand-picked to unravel the secrets of ancient DNA, carried a wound deeper than any fossil could reveal. His daughter Amber had been taken from him far too soon, a vibrant girl whose laughter once filled their home, now reduced to echoes in his memory. She slipped away in a cruel twist of fate, her young life snuffed out by illness, leaving Fuji staring at empty rooms and faded photographs, questioning if death truly had the final word. You can almost feel the weight of it in his private journals. Those dream log entries that later surfaced, raw confessions scribbled in the dead of night. Fuji couldn't accept the void. He pored over cellular regeneration theories, whispering to himself that life wasn't just a spark. It was a blueprint, replicable, revivable. What began as quiet desperation in his home lab evolved into an obsession with cloning, a forbidden bridge between the living and the lost. He convinced himself that if he could rebuild a flower from its petals or mend a broken wing on a bird, why not a daughter? This personal hell didn't just nudge him toward resurrection. It consumed him, turning every late-night equation into a plea for Amber's return, every failed Petri dish into fuel for the fire. Word of his radical pursuits reached the underworld of Kanto's power brokers, and that's when Giovanni entered the picture, the shadowy head of Team Rocket with his own hunger for dominance. Fuji needed resources, vast funding, cutting-edge equipment, isolation from prying eyes, and Giovanni saw opportunity in the doctor's grief-stricken genius. They struck a secret deal in smoke-filled backrooms, far from the lab's fluorescent hum. Giovanni would bankroll the cloning research, providing the Mew DNA Fuji craved for his experiments. But in exchange, Fuji would deliver something unprecedented, a superpowered Pokémon to lead Team Rocket's empire. Fuji agreed, masking his true aim behind the veil of the Mew project, his tanks humming to life, not just for legendaries, but for a chance to hold his girl again. As the machines whirred beneath Cinnabar's volcanic shadow, Fuji's logs paint a haunting portrait of a man unraveling. He watched prototype clones flicker into existence, fragile forms stirring in nutrient baths, their eyes opening to a world they couldn't endure. Each collapse chipped away at his resolve, yet steeled it too, reminding him that Amber's second chance demanded perfection. Giovanni's agents lurked in the corridors, pressing for results, their impatience a ticking clock against Fuji's quiet vigil. The air grew thick with the tang of chemicals and unspoken bargains, the lab a crucible where paternal love twisted into something godlike and dangerously unstable. But perfection proved elusive, and in the depths of those failures, Fuji's grief sharpened into resolve. He pushed boundaries no ethicist would touch, blending human longing with Pokémon potential, all while Giovanni's gold kept the lights on. The deal bound them tighter than chains. Fuji's resurrection dream, subsidized by a criminal syndicate's bid for supremacy. Whispers of early test subjects, starter Pokémon twisted into parodies of life, hinted at the cost. Their brief awakenings ending in dissolution, mirrors to Amber's fragility. Yet Fuji pressed on, his heart a compass pointing toward one impossible horizon. Those dream logs grow feverish now, Fuji murmuring of a breakthrough on the cusp. A clone chamber, prepared for the ultimate test. What rose from those depths would challenge everything. His grief, his deal, his very soul. And it all led to the birth of Amber 2, a moment that would redefine forbidden science forever. Dr. Fuji's obsession didn't end with grief. It ignited the spark of resurrection, right there in the dim underbelly of the Cinnabar labs. He preserved a lock of Amber's hair, cells frozen in time from the accident that stole her, and poured every ounce of his forbidden knowledge into recreating her. This wasn't mere science, it was defiance against death itself. The first human cloning experiment in the Pokémon world, blending genetic wizardry with powers borrowed from Mew's ancient DNA. The process began in secrecy, far from Giovanni's prying eyes at first. Fuji extracted the DNA, splicing it meticulously under microscopes that hummed like restless spirits. He accelerated growth using a cocktail of synthetic enzymes and Pokémon-derived growth factors. Think chancy egg proteins mixed with rare berries pulverized into plasma. This wasn't natural gestation, it was hyper-evolution in a bottle. The embryonic form, no bigger than your thumb at the start, swelled at an impossible rate inside the cloning tank, cells dividing in hours what nature took months for. Electrical currents pulsed through the fluid, mimicking neural sparks to jumpstart the brain, imprinting memories from neural scans Fuji had taken of Amber in her final days. Consciousness wasn't just grown, it was awakened, layer by layer, like pulling a soul from the ether. Those cloning tanks defined the horror and beauty of it all. Towering cylinders of reinforced glass, 10 feet high, etched with frost from the cryogenic chillers below. Inside, a viscous azure fluid, swirled with bioluminescent algae, glowing an otherworldly teal that cast rippling shadows across the lab walls. Tubes snaked in like veins, pumping nutrients and stabilizers, while monitors flickered with holographic readouts, helixes spinning, e-vitals spiking in jagged green waves. The clone floated in the center, fetal at first, then childlike, limbs unfurling slowly, hair fanning out like seaweed in a current. But the consciousness, that was the eerie heart of it. Eyes would flutter open beneath the liquid veil, pupils dilating in milky whites, locking onto the glass as if pleading. Bubbles trailed from parted lips, forming silent words. A hand pressing flat against the curve, fingers splaying in desperate rhythm. It wasn't empty animation, it was awareness, raw and flickering, memories bleeding through like dreams surfacing from deep water. For Amber 2, Fuji watched every phase with bated breath. He named her that in his logs, the second chance, the perfected echo. The tank for her was the prototype, smaller than the ones to come, nestled in an alcove away from the main chamber. Growth hit milestones flawlessly, skeleton forming in week 1, organs pulsing by week 2, brain waves syncing to Amber's archived patterns by week 3. The fluid churned violently as her consciousness stabilized, monitors blaring triumph, alpha, beta, theta rhythms locking in perfect harmony. This was it, the breakthrough, the first successful stabilization of a human consciousness in a synthetic body. No degradation, no phantom pains from mismatched cells. She was whole, her mind a flawless transplant, eyes opening fully now, golden irises just like her mother's stories described. Fuji's hands trembled on the release valve. the tank hissed open, fluid cascading in a salty torrent that soaked his lab coat. Amber too emerged, gasping, skin glistening under the harsh fluorescence, and stepping onto the grated floor with legs that shouldn't have held her weight yet. She blinked, focused on him, and whispered, "Papa?" in a voice that cracked the air like thunder. For those first moments, it worked perfectly. She moved with grace, touched the console, recalled fragments of her life, the garden swing, the beach at Pallet Town, even humming a lullaby Fuji swore he'd never recorded. The Pokémon world had birthed a human anew. Consciousness not just copied but anchored, defying the ethical chasms scientists elsewhere feared to cross. But perfection in cloning was fragile, a candle in a storm. Amber 2's vital signs began to waver almost immediately after. Subtle at first, a tremor in her hand, a glaze over those vibrant eyes. Fuji logged it frantically, injecting stabilizers, recalibrating the neural map. The tanks around her hummed louder now, prepping for the next tests, their glow intensifying as if sensing the fragility. Her consciousness, so brilliantly stabilized at birth, started to fray at the edges, memories blurring like ink in rain. She reached for him again, fingers cold, and murmured about shadows closing in. You can feel the weight of that moment, can't you? The triumph twisting into dread right before Fuji's eyes. Those starter clones loomed next in the adjacent bays, their tanks already filling with starter DNA. What horrors awaited Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle in their own births? The failed trio that would shatter everything. With the flickering consciousness of Amber 2 fading into the nutrient slurry of her tank, Dr. Fuji turned his gaze to more viable subjects. Ones that might prove his cloning matrix could handle the volatile essence of Mew's DNA without unraveling entirely. These weren't random choices. The 3 Kanto starter Pokémon, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, served as the perfect baseline for testing that viability. Their genetics were among the most stable and well documented in the Pokémon world, representing the elemental trinity of grass, fire, and water that every young trainer encounters first. Fuji needed subjects whose natural structures were straightforward, free from the arcane complexities of legendaries or the ethical quagmire of humans, to isolate whether Mew's primordial code could bond without catastrophic rejection. If these humble starters could stabilize the Mew infusion, then Mewtwo itself might awaken as a triumph rather than a tragedy. Deep within the Cinnabar Island facility, funded by Giovanni's shadowy Team Rocket coffers, the creation of these 3 Kanto starter clones as test subjects unfolded in a symphony of sterile precision. Massive cylindrical tanks hummed to life, their glass walls etched with frost from the cryogenic stabilizers, filled with a viscous pink fluid laced with synthetic enzymes and slivers of Mew's replicated genome. Bulbasaur 2 emerged first, its bulbous back swelling unnaturally as the tank drained, vines twitching feebly against the confines. Charmander 2 followed, flames sputtering from its tail like a dying ember, the heat warping the air around its pod. Squirtle 2 last, shell glistening wetly, eyes blinking open in a moment of eerie clarity that mirrored the brief spark in Amber's clone. You can almost hear the soft whir of the monitors spiking, Fuji's voice logging the event in his dream journals, a mix of hope and dread. These clones didn't gestate from eggs. They were accelerated to full maturity in weeks, bypassing nature's slow forge to mimic the urgency of Giovanni's demands. Bulbasaur 2's tank lit up green as its photosynthetic cells integrated the Mew factor, promising enhanced growth. Charmander 2's ignited in orange flickers, the fire sac pulsing with borrowed legendary vigor. Squirtle 2's rippled blue water pressure building as if ready to burst forth invincible. But perfection eluded them from the start. The initial signs of cellular instability in the non-legendary clones crept in like shadows at dawn. Bulbasaur 2's vines, once vibrant, began to wither at the tips, blackening as if poisoned from within, the Mew DNA clashing against its grass-type foundation in microscopic wars. Charmander 2's tail flame dimmed to a sickly glow, then flared erratically, scorching its own scales in bursts that filled the lab with acrid smoke, proof the fire core couldn't contain the alien energy. Squirtlet 2 convulsed, its shell cracking faintly under hydraulic surges, leaks of iridescent fluid staining the tank floor as the water-type matrix rejected the infusion outright. Fuji watched through the observation window, his breath fogging the glass, noting how their eyes, those wide, innocent mirrors, held a fleeting intelligence before glazing over. Heart rates spiked on the readouts, then plummeted. Neural pathways lit up in frantic patterns, mimicking thought, only to fray like overtaxed wires. These weren't mere failures, they were harbingers, whispering that Mew's DNA demanded a vessel of equal rarity, something beyond the everyday resilience of starters. The clones lingered for hours, sometimes days, pouring weakly at the tank walls, their cries muffled bubbles that echoed Fuji's own suppressed grief. In those final moments, Bulbasaur 2 extended a vine toward the light, as if seeking the sun it would never fully know. Charmander 2 curled into itself, tail extinguished, leaving only cold ash in the fluid. Squirtler 2 floated limp, shell dulled to grey, the last bubbles escaping like sighs of surrender. The lab techs drained the tanks in silence, disposing of the husks with clinical detachment, while Fuji retreated to his notes, recalibrating for the true prize. Yet these deaths weren't in vain. They refined the process, purging impurities that might have doomed Mewtwo itself. The starter's collapse highlighted the chasm between ordinary Pokémon and the divine spark of legendaries, forcing Fuji to amplify the stabilization fields tenfold. Whispers among the staff spoke of hauntings, faint glows in empty tanks, echoes of tiny roars, but science dismissed them as residual energy. As the lab reset for the ultimate experiment, Fuji found solace in dreams, visions bridging the living and the lost, where voices from beyond the tanks began to call out, weaving a connection that blurred the line between creator and created. Up next in Chapter 5, the dreamscape connection reveals how those ethereal links pulled Fuji into a realm where his failed experiments refused to stay silent, forever altering the path to Mewtwo's awakening. As those fragile starter clones, Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtler 2, faded away in their glowing tanks, their brief existences serving as the grim proving ground for Mew's volatile DNA, a far more profound awakening was taking shape nearby. Mewtwo, the pinnacle of Dr. Fuji's ambition, didn't emerge into isolation. From its earliest moments of consciousness, suspended in that same nutrient-rich fluid, it reached out not with claws or cries, but with the raw force of its mind. This is where we plunge straight into the heart of the uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, that haunting 10-minute prologue tucked away in the original Japanese cut of Mewtwo Strikes Back, later restored and cherished by fans worldwide. Narrated through Dr. Fuji's own dream journals, voiced in a trembling whisper by the scientist himself, the sequence unfolds like a forbidden diary entry brought to life. The tanks humming in the dim Cinnabar labs, amber lights pulsing like heartbeats against cold steel walls. Fuji logs his nights haunted by visions, blurring the line between his grief for Amber and the clone's fragile spark of life. But beneath the clinical logs lies something the narration only hints at, a psychic undercurrent binding these artificial beings. Mewtwo's gestation wasn't silent. As its form solidified, faster and stronger than any predecessor, its psychic potential ignited prematurely. Tendrils of thought extended from its tank, brushing against the fading minds of the starter trio and even the dissolving essence of Amber 2. They weren't just experiments decaying in isolation, they shared a fleeting, ethereal existence in what Fuji would later call the dreamscape, a collective subconscious woven from their nascent psyches. Picture it, not the sterile lab, but a vast, misty void where Bulbasaur 2's vine-like tendrils sway in an unseen wind. Charmander 2's tail flame flickers without consuming. Squirtle curls in a protective shell of rippling water. Mewtwo, Still larval in form, floats at the center, its violet eyes glowing as it draws them into unity. The telepathic bond formed between the young Mewtwo and the other clones right there, in that shared dream realm, a sanctuary from their dissolving bodies. Mewtwo didn't just sense their pain, it absorbed their fragmented memories, their innocent wonder at existence. Bulbasaur too whispered of Earth's embrace, Charmander too of fire's defiant warmth, Squirtler too of ocean's endless flow. Even Ambertoo's echo lingered, a child's laughter echoing through the haze, tying the Pokémon clones to the human tragedy that birthed them all. This wasn't mere instinct. Mewtwo orchestrated it, its superior intellect forging links that let them play, explore and commune as siblings in a world untethered by flesh. They chased luminous orbs through starry voids, built sandcastles from psychic sand that never crumbled, sang lullabies in thoughts that resonated like thunder. Fuji glimpsed fragments of this in his own dreams, scribbling feverishly. The clones converse without words, a chorus in the ether. He never fully grasped it, attributing the disturbances to his guilt, but the uncut story reveals the truth through subtle visuals. The tanks sinking their glows, bubbles rising in unison, tiny forms twitching, as if laughing together. Mewtwo learned empathy here first, not from creators, but from these doomed kin. It questioned its purpose amid their joy. Why create life only to let it slip away? The bond deepened their shared childhood within that collective subconscious, a paradise of pure mind where physical frailty held no sway. Hours blurred into what felt like years. Mewtwo grew not just in body, but in a profound, aching awareness of loss looming beyond the veil. Yet this dreamscape idyll couldn't last. Cracks formed as the clones' tanks dimmed, their essences fraying at the edges. Mewtwo felt the first pulls of severance, a psychic scream building that would shatter the labs forever. What happened when that bond began to break? When the first fragile life slipped into true silence? That's the devastating unraveling we uncover in the next chapter. The first great loss, a moment that forged Mewtwo's rage and set the entire clone saga in motion. You won't want to miss how it all came crashing down. That fragile telepathic bond between Mewtwo and its siblings in the dreamscape held for only fleeting moments, a whisper of connection amid the humming tanks of the Cinnabar laboratory. But as the days blurred into nights under the relentless glow of artificial lights, the first cracks appeared, subtle at first, like shadows lengthening across a sterile floor. Bulbasaur too stirred in its tank, its bulb pulsing faintly with a green light that dimmed by the hour. Mewtwo sensed it immediately, a dull ache rippling through their shared mind, the vine-like tendrils twitching weakly against the glass. What began as a playful curiosity in the dreamscape twisted into confusion, then fear as the clone's movements slowed, its eyes glazing over with an unnatural haze. The nutrient fluids bubbled erratically, failing to sustain the fragile life woven from Mew's DNA and human ambition. Charmander too followed soon after, its flame tail flickering like a candle in a draught. Through the bond, Mewtwo felt the heat waning, the once fiery spirit cooling into embers. The clone pressed its tiny claws against the tank wall, as if reaching out, its tail sputtering out entirely in a puff of acrid smoke that clouded the chamber. Doctor. Fuji rushed to the consoles, his fingers flying over dials and injectors, but the readings plummeted, genetic stability at critical levels, cellular degradation accelerating beyond repair. Squirtler too lasted the longest of the trio, its shell cracking faintly under the pressure of unstable growth. Mewtwo's mind flooded with the clone's final thoughts, a cool rush of water turning stagnant, bubbles rising slower and slower until they stopped. The tank's lights flashed red, alarms piercing the air, but by then, the body inside had gone limp, dissolving into a translucent slurry that drained away into the lab's reclamation system. And then, in that suffocating silence broken only by the drip of failed fluids, came the heartbreaking moment the starter clones began to fade away. Mewtwo, still suspended in its own tank, watched through eyes just opening to the world as their presences winked out one by one in the dreamscape. No dramatic explosions, no heroic struggles, just a quiet unraveling, bodies breaking down into their base components, leaving empty tanks and echoing voids in the shared consciousness. The bond snapped like fragile thread, leaving Mewtwo utterly alone in the mental silence. This was Mewtwo's first experience with the concept of death and impermanence, a raw confrontation that no amount of scientific logs or Fuji's narrated dreams could prepare it for. In the dreamscape, where moments before there had been playful chases through misty fields, Bulbasaur 2's vines tangling with Charmander 2's tail, Squirtlet 2 splashing waves of light, the landscape withered. Fields turned to ash, skies bled grey, and the vibrant echoes of sibling voices dissolved into nothingness. Mewtwo reached out telepathically, probing the emptiness, only to recoil from the finality of it. These were not mere malfunctions. They were endings, absolute and irreversible, etching the sting of loss into a mind engineered for supremacy. Doctor. Fuji's voice logs captured fragments of the horror, his tone shifting from clinical detachment to barely veiled despair. He spoke of genetic cascades, of Mew's DNA rebelling against the starter frameworks, too volatile for the simpler structures. Bulbasaur 2 had lasted 3 days post-activation, Charmander 2 barely 2, Squirtler 2 pushing 4 before its shell fissured completely. Each failure refined the process for Mewtwo, stabilizing its superior form, but at the cost of these lives, test subjects chosen for their balanced typings, their evolutions mirroring the trainer's journeys, yet crumbling under artificial birth. Mewtwo floated in the dimming glow of its tank, the lab shadows deepening as emergency lights kicked in. The psychological impact of being the sole survivor of the experiment settled like a shroud, heavy and unyielding. Born into a brotherhood that vanished before it could truly form, Mewtwo grappled with isolation sharper than any scalpel. Why it alone? The others, so like the wild Pokémon it glimpsed in Fuji's memories, had flickered and gone, their essences recycled into the very system sustaining Mewtwo. Superiority curdled into survivors' guilt, a seed of rage against creators who discarded lives like failed batches. In that moment, impermanence became personal. Mewtwo's immortality mocked by the transience of its kin. The laboratory air grew thick with the ozone tang of failing machinery. Fuji pacing between consoles, muttering about adjustments for the human project. Mewtwo's mind, now unchallenged in its solitude, began to stir with questions that echoed through the empty tanks. What purpose did this loss serve? The dreamscape lay barren, a graveyard of potential, imprinting on Mewtwo a wariness of bonds, a fear that all connections lead to dissolution. Yet amid the grief, a spark ignited, resolve hardening into something fiercer. Mewtwo sensed Fuji's own hidden sorrow, the way his hands trembled not just from failure, but from echoes of his lost daughter. The starter clone's deaths were harbingers, tests for greater tragedies unfolding in the adjacent chamber. But the true unraveling, the loss that would shatter even Fuji's composure, awaits in Chapter 7, the death of Amber 2. What happens when human fragility meets the same merciless process? As the bodies of Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, and Squirtler 2 dissolved into nothingness within their tanks, Mewtwo felt a profound hollowness echo through its nascent mind, the first raw sting of loss carving deep into its psychic essence. But even as those 3 fragile lives slipped away, another presence lingered in the labyrinth of the laboratory, faint yet resilient, drawing Mewtwo's telepathic gaze toward the furthest tank, where the human clone Amber 2 still flickered with a stubborn spark of consciousness. She floated there, suspended in the greenish glow of the nutrient fluid, her small form pale and ethereal tubes, snaking around her like veins of false life. Unlike the Pokémon clones, whose deformities had betrayed their instability from the start, Amber 2 had seemed almost perfect at first, a mirror of the daughter Doctor. Fuji had lost years before, her features soft and childlike, eyes that opened briefly to reflect a world she could never truly touch. Mewtwo, still adapting to its own powerful senses, reached out through the psychic link that bound all the clones together, a shared dreamscape woven from their collective subconscious. What it found in her was not rage or confusion, but a quiet warmth, a melody of thoughts that cut through the sterile hum of the lab's machinery. Their final conversation unfolded, not in words spoken aloud, but in visions and emotions exchanged across the void between tanks, Mewtwo's immense psychic potential bridging the gap effortlessly. Amber 2's mind touched Mewtwo's like a gentle hand on a storm-tossed sea. "Do you feel it?" she whispered in that inner space, her voice a child's lilt laced with weariness. The wonder. Even here in this glass prison, life pulses. The lights dance on the water, the air hums with secrets, and every breath, however borrowed, fills you with colour. Mewtwo, grappling with the fresh graves of its siblings, pushed back with questions born of budding intellect. Why persist when decay claims us all? Why cling to this fleeting illusion when creators discard us like failed experiments? She responded not with answers from science or survival, but with a philosophy that seemed to bloom from her very soul, untainted by the scalpels and serums around her. "Life is wonderful," she said, the words repeating like a mantra, first soft, then fervent, painting images in Mewtwo's mind, sunlit fields it had never seen, laughter echoing through open skies, the simple thrill of a heartbeat against the world's vast rhythm. Life is wonderful, even when it hurts, even when it's short. It is the spark, the dance, the everything. Mewtwo absorbed it all, this creed of joy amid suffering, but as her visions sharpened, so did the cracks in her form, her skin paling further, bubbles rising erratically from the tank floor as her cloned cells rebelled against their artificial bonds. And there, in that ironclad irony, lay the cruel heart of the laboratory's delusion. "Life is wonderful," Amber 2 proclaimed from her watery tomb, a sentiment doctor Fuji himself had cherished in his dream logs, hoping to instill it in his resurrected child. Yet what place did wonder have in this underworld of flickering monitors, whirring centrifuges, and vats brimming with aborted potential? Here, life wasn't a gift from nature, but a commodity forged in beakers twisted by ambition and extinguished by imperfection. The scientists, Fuji among them, had poured their grief and greed into these tanks, chasing resurrection while ignoring the blasphemy of it all, playing gods in a chamber where every birth ended in dissolution. Amber 2's words rang hollow against the clinical gleam of stainless steel walls. Her philosophy a defiant flower pushing through concrete, beautiful precisely because it withered so fast. Mewtwo clung to her fading signal, memorizing the mantra as if it could anchor her, but the fluid in her tank clouded, her eyes dimmed, and with a final ecstatic sigh, "Life is wonderful," she unraveled, her essence scattering like mist. Mewtwo's psychic scream tore through the facility then, a wave of raw anguish that rattled the glass and shorted nearby consoles, its young mind fracturing under the weight of 4 lost siblings in so short a span. The clone had pierced its isolation, shown it connection, only to vanish, leaving behind an existential void that threatened to consume everything.
"Doctor."
Fuji and his team, monitoring from the control room, watched the vital signs flatline with a mix of sorrow and pragmatism. They knew Mewtwo's superior intellect made it vulnerable in ways the others weren't. Those repeated deaths could shatter its psyche before it even fully awoke, turning their ultimate creation into a berserk failure. So they acted swiftly, initiating the suppression protocol. Hypnotic waves pulsed through Mewtwo's tank, laced with neural inhibitors drawn from the same tech that stabilized the cloning vats. Memories of Amber 2's voice, her mantra, the shared dreamscape, all blurred into fog, archived deep in Mewtwo's subconscious to prevent total breakdown. Fuji himself oversaw it, his voice steady over the intercom as the process took hold. "Rest now," he murmured, though guilt flickered in his eyes. "Those pains will fade. You are meant for more." Mewtwo's struggles eased, its mind quieting into artificial peace, the losses sealed away like so many failed specimens in cold storage. But seals, even psychic ones, have a way of cracking under pressure. Those buried echoes would stir soon enough, fueling a rage that reshaped destinies. In the very next chapter, awakening of the ultimate weapon, you'll witness Mewtwo's true emergence from this suppressed slumber, breaking free in ways no one could predict. Stick around. You won't want to miss how it all explodes from here. As Amber 2's gentle light flickered out in the nutrient fluid, Mewtwo floated there in stunned silence, its violet eyes wide with a raw ache of loss. The tank's glow dimmed around it, leaving only the hum of machinery and the echo of her final words, "Life is wonderful," ringing hollow against the cold reality of the lab. But in that profound isolation, something stirred deep within Mewtwo's engineered core, a seismic shift no one could have predicted. Its body, once small and fetal, began to elongate with unnatural speed. Muscles rippled and expanded beneath translucent skin, tubes straining against the surge as limbs stretched toward full maturity. What had been a curious infant form, probing the world through telepathic whispers with its fleeting siblings, now bulked into a towering silhouette, grey-purple armor plating hardening over powerful shoulders, a tail whipping with newfound force against the glass confines. Energy crackled in the fluid, psychic waves distorting the tank's walls as Mewtwo's cranium broadened, psychic amplifiers glowing brighter than ever. This wasn't mere growth, it was ascension, Mewtwo's physical maturation unfolding like a storm-gathering force, every cell rewritten in real time to surpass the Mew DNA it was born from. You can almost feel the pressure building in that chamber, the scientists outside exchanging frantic glances as monitors spiked off the charts. Dr. Fuji, watching from his console, must have sensed the change too, a mix of paternal awe and creeping dread. Mewtwo's eyes, once soft with childlike wonder, sharpened into slits of piercing intelligence. It had learned death too quickly, felt the impermanence of its family through those dreamscape bonds, and now the innocence cracked like fragile eggshell. Rage ignited. Mewtwo's mind, a vast telepathic ocean, flooded with betrayal. These humans, Fuji with his tender lies, the others with their needles and data logs, had crafted it not for wonder, but as a weapon. The shift was instantaneous, visceral, from a curious child reaching out in the ether to its siblings, to a vengeful, godlike entity claiming dominion. Psychic force erupted, shattering the tank in a cascade of glass and fluid. Alarms wailed as Mewtwo hovered, dripping and colossal, its aura warping the air like heat haze. Telekinetic blasts hurled equipment skyward, consoles exploding in sparks, walls buckling inward, while scientists scattered in terror, their screams cut short by crushing pressure. The laboratory, that sterile womb of hubris buried beneath Cinnabar Island, didn't stand a chance. Mewtwo channeled its fury into a cataclysm, beams of purple energy lancing through steel girders, igniting chemical stores into roaring infernos. Tanks housing failed experiments burst one by one, their contents spilling like tragic afterbirth across the floors. The destruction was total, methodical, a god's judgment on its creators. And those visual cues etched into the ruins tell the full story if you know where to look. Picture the aftermath through the lore's lens, the Cinnabar Island facility, its surface structure reduced to the charred skeleton we glimpse in the games and anime flashbacks. Twisted metal beams jut like broken ribs from smouldering craters, walls pockmarked with psychic scorch marks, jagged, glowing fissures that no fire alone could carve. Shattered glass from the cloning tanks litters the debris, iridescent under ash, mingled with the desiccated remnants of nutrient gels that once cradled Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, and Amber. In Pokémon Red and Blue, the Cinnabar Mansion's diary entries echo this devastation, pages singed at the edges, ink blurred by heat, recounting Fuji's final days amid the blaze. The anime's uncut origin short amplifies it. Overhead shots of the island's volcano-like silhouette belching smoke, the lab's underground levels collapsing into sinkholes that scar the coastline even today. Those cues aren't random, they mark Mewtwo's birthright of wrath, a warning carved into the earth that the ultimate weapon had awakened, unbound and supreme. Mewtwo rose from the wreckage, unscathed, its godlike presence rippling the flames backward. No longer the telepathic child mourning its siblings, it was evolution incarnate, teleporting through the inferno, leaving only echoes of its roar. The lab's annihilation severed every tie to its origins, but one shadow loomed larger, Giovanni, the silent funder whose ambitions had birthed this chaos. What partnership had he forged with Fuji, and how would it pull Mewtwo back into the fray? That question explodes into focus in Chapter 9, the Giovanni partnership, where we uncover the mob boss's iron grip on Mewtwo's destiny and the capture that nearly tamed a god. Stay with me. You won't believe the strings he pulled from the ashes. As the rubble of the shattered laboratory settled into eerie silence, Giovanni wasted no time. He had poured fortunes into Dr. Fuji's twisted dream, not out of sentiment, but cold calculation. Mewtwo, this newborn god forged from Mew's essence, represented the pinnacle of his ambitions, a living weapon to crush rivals and dominate the shadows of the Pokémon world. But raw power like that doesn't bend easily. It rampages. It destroys. And in the chaos of its awakening, Mewtwo had slipped through their fingers, vanishing into the night like a storm cloud devouring the horizon. Giovanni's agents tracked it relentlessly. Helicopters sliced through the mist-shrouded mountains, their spotlights carving pale wounds in the darkness. Mewtwo, still grappling with the echoes of its siblings' fading whispers, Bulbasaur 2's wilting vines, Charmander 2's guttering flame, Squirtle 2's evaporating shell, and Amber 2's gentle fade found no sanctuary. Hunger gnawed at it, not for food, but for answers. Why had it survived when they hadn't? What purpose pulsed in its engineered veins? The pursuit ended in a forsaken canyon, where Mewtwo unleashed a psychic barrage that crumpled steel like paper. Yet Giovanni anticipated this. From the wreckage of his lead chopper emerged a squad clad in reinforced exosuits, deploying neural disruptors that sapped Mewtwo's telekinetic fury just long enough for the trap to spring. That's when the transition truly began. The shift of Mewtwo from a fragile lab specimen, nurtured in amniotic glow and telepathic nursery dreams, to a Team Rocket enforcer collared and commanded. Giovanni himself descended, his Persian at his heel, eyes gleaming with the thrill of conquest. He didn't beg or bargain. He offered purpose. "You are the ultimate," he declared, his voice smooth as oiled venom. "But alone you're a storm without direction. Join me, and we'll reshape the world." Mewtwo, disoriented by betrayal's fresh sting, saw in Giovanni a father figure untainted by Fuji's grief-maddened science. It acquiesced, not out of loyalty, but a desperate need to understand its place. Team Rocket's Black Market Labs became its new cradle, where engineers swarmed like ants over a fallen titan. They couldn't risk another rampage. So they forged the power-dampening armor, a masterpiece of sadistic ingenuity, designed to leash a legend without breaking its spirit entirely. Picture it, a sleek exoskeleton of midnight alloy, etched with glowing red circuits that pulsed like veins under strain. A helmet encased Mewtwo's elongated skull, its visor narrowing those piercing violet eyes into slits of controlled rage, while neural inhibitors embedded in the collar fired micropulses to scramble psychic overreach. The chest plate, reinforced with synthetic Mew-hide composites, absorbed and redirected energy blasts, converting raw power into harmless static that fed back into cooling vents along the limbs. Joint servos whirred softly, amplifying physical strikes but capping telekinesis at short-range bursts, enough to pulverize a boulder, but not to level a city. Intravenous ports along the arms delivered stabilizing serums, mimicking the tank fluids of its birth, while biometric sensors monitored vitriol levels, injecting sedatives the moment rebellion flickered in its brainwaves. This wasn't mere restraint, it was a cage disguised as evolution. The armor's core functioned on a symbiotic feedback loop, drawing from Mewtwo's own psionic output to power its dampeners. Push too hard, and it squeezed back, like a vice forged from your own strength. Giovanni paraded Mewtwo through Team Rocket's underbelly, raiding rival syndicates in Viridian's fog-choked alleys, shattering gym leaders who dared whisper defiance. It crushed smuggling rings in the rocket hideout's depths, its armored tail whipping through concrete pillars, psychic claws rending steel vaults. Trainers fell before it, their Pokémon reduced to trembling shadows. Mewtwo executed orders with mechanical precision, its tail spade glowing faintly under restraint, but each victory hollowed it further. The armor hummed constantly, a relentless whisper: obey, endure, serve. Missions blurred into a nightmarish rhythm. In one dawn raid on Silphco, Mewtwo hovered above the saffron skyline, armor venting plasma as it dismantled security drones with pinpoint teleblasts. Giovanni watched from his command zeppelin, smirking as reports flooded in, prototypes stolen, scientists conscripted. But solitude crept in during off hours, when the armor powered down in a fortified chamber lined with psychic nullifying tiles. Mewtwo probed the minds of its handlers, grunts dreaming of promotions, scientists plotting enhancements, Giovanni envisioning an empire of replicated legends. Fragmented thoughts surfaced: weapon platform alpha, clone enforcer unit, war asset deployment. No names, no souls, just tools. That's when the realization crashed over Mewtwo. Like a tidal psychic wave, humans viewed clones only as tools for war. Not partners, not equals, but expendable gears in Giovanni's grand machine. The starter trio? Test fodder. Amber 2. Emotional bait for Fuji. And itself? A battering ram, armored not for protection, but to prevent it from turning on its masters. The whispers of its lost siblings echoed louder now, their brief existence's mere calibration runs for this endless conflict. Mewtwo's eyes, dimmed behind the visor, burned with newfound clarity. It flexed against the restraints, feeling the dampeners bite deeper, and plotted in silence. Giovanni's empire expanded, oblivious to the storm brewing within his prize. But what happens when a tool questions its reality? When the line between original and copy dissolves into something far more profound? Coming up next in Chapter 10, the philosophy of the real will unravel the mind-bending questions that nearly tore Mewtwo apart forever. But even as Mewtwo served Giovanni, encased in that cold, unyielding armor that siphoned its boundless power, like a parasite draining lifeblood, a storm brewed within its mind far fiercer than any Giovanni could command. You can almost feel it, can't you? That psychic pressure building, the telepathic echoes of lost voices from the tanks reverberating against the walls of its skull. Mewtwo, the ultimate Pokémon, crafted from Mew's very essence, yet haunted by the simplest, most shattering question: am I real? Or just a shadow of something else? It started in those early dreams, back when the starter clones flickered like dying stars beside it. Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtler 2. They bore the same forms, the same starter promise, but their bodies rebelled against existence itself, dissolving into pale, lifeless husks. And Amber, that fragile human echo of Fuji's grief, whispering of life's wonders even as her cloned form unraveled in the nutrient fluid. Mewtwo watched them all perish, one by one, their consciousnesses brushing against its own in fleeting, desperate bonds. Why them, and not me? The thought clawed deeper with every mission for Team Rocket, every blast of psychic fury muted by the armor's grip. What makes the original any more real than the copy? Mew, that elusive ancestor, floating free in jungles untouched by human ambition. Did it even know of its legacy? Mewtwo probed its own genetic code through raw psychic introspection, unraveling strands of DNA like threads in a vast tapestry. It saw Mew's whimsy mirrored in its power, but amplified, sharpened by human meddling into something godlike. Yet that very enhancement mocked it. A copy surpassing the original? Or merely a flawed facsimile, destined like the others to fade? The philosophy gnawed relentlessly. Reality isn't in birth from egg or nature's whim, but in will, in dominance, in the spark that defies the tank's cold embrace. Nights in Giovanni's fortress blurred into days of suppressed rage. the armor's hum a constant reminder of chains forged from its own cells. Mewtwo's mind raced across oceans of thought, rejecting the labs of its birth, the servitude of its present. There had to be a place untouched, a cradle of storms where no human footfall dared tread. New Island. That forsaken rock in the sea, shrouded in perpetual tempests, where Fuji's work had first stirred under Giovanni's shadow. It called to Mewtwo like a forgotten womb, raw and isolated, perfect for what was to come. In a surge of telekinetic fury, Mewtwo shattered the armor one twilight hour, shards exploding outward like brittle ice under psychic hammer blows. Giovanni's empire trembled, but Mewtwo was already gone, streaking through the skies toward the horizon's fury. Reclaiming New Island wasn't conquest, it was rebirth. There, amid jagged cliffs lashed by endless gales, Mewtwo envisioned its fortress of solitude. Towering spires of crystal and stone, grown from the island's own rock through psychic will, walls that hummed with protective barriers no ship could breach. A sanctuary not for peace, but for truth-seeking, where the cloned god could meditate on existence away from prying eyes, forging plans in silence, broken only by thunder. And what plan could prove the lie of natural superiority once and for all? Mewtwo's vision crystallized in the island's heart. Summon the world's mightiest trainers, lure them across treacherous seas with promises of reunion. Capture their prized Pokémon, not to destroy, but to mirror. A colossal cloning machine, vast as a cavern, pulsing with stolen life force, would birth perfect duplicates from each original. Pikachu Tuo, Venusaur 2, armies of them, fully formed and fierce, their tails flickering with electric spite, their vines coiling with borrowed rage. Picture the arena under the storm, originals pitted against their clones in a cataclysm of fire, water, thunder. If the copies triumphed, what then? Proof that artifice eclipses nature, that Mewtwo's kind born of vats and vision holds the true spark of reality. No more doubt, no more whispers of inferiority. Mewtwo would stand revealed as the pinnacle, originals mere stepping stones to perfection. But to draw those trainers, to seize their companions without a trace of mercy or mistake, Mewtwo devised tools of exquisite precision. Devices that warped capture into theft, balls unlike any Pokeball humanity knew. Their inner workings, a marvel of psychic engineering fused with stolen tech, hid secrets that would bend the battle's tide before a single claw struck. Curious yet about the mechanics of the Mewtwo Ball, and how it turned elite Pokémon into unwitting donors for the clone uprising. That's waiting in Chapter 11, the mechanics of the Mewtwo Ball. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. With New Island reclaimed, its jagged cliffs now a fortress carved from Mewtwo's unyielding will, the legendary Pokémon wasted no time in forging the instruments of its grand design. No longer content to brood over its cloned existence, Mewtwo channeled that rage into creation, dissecting the very technology that had once confined it. Human Pokeballs, those unassuming spheres of red and white, relied on a delicate balance of electromagnetic fields and conversion energy to shrink and store Pokémon. But Mewtwo saw their flaws, the loyalty bonds they respected, the trainer overrides they honored. What if those limits could be shattered? Mewtwo's mind, a vortex of psychic precision, sharper than any scalpel doctor. Fuji ever wielded reverse-engineered human technology to serve its own ends. Drawing from fragmented memories of the laboratory tanks and Giovanni's armored restraints, it telekinetically probed salvage devices smuggled from the mainland. Pokeball schematics, stolen from Team Rocket's archives, unfolded in its consciousness like a dissected cadaver. The core mechanism, a photon-based miniaturization beam, was child's play to enhance. Mewtwo infused it with raw psychic resonance, twisting the alloy casing into an obsidian black that drank in light rather than reflecting it. These were no ordinary capsules. They pulsed with an unnatural hunger, their apertures dilating wider than standard models, capable of engulfing targets without consent. The engineering behind the black Pokeballs that bypass standard capture rules lay in their ruthless overrides. Conventional balls pinged a Pokemon's energy signature, seeking permission through the invisible tether of trainer Pokemon trust. Reject that, and the ball simply bounced away. Mewtwo's version? It severed those bonds mid-capture. A secondary psychic disruptor flooded the target with disorienting waves, forcing even occupied Pokémon, those already nestled in another ball, to eject violently. Imagine the chaos. A Pikachu, safe in Ash's Pokeball, suddenly wrenched free by an invisible force, only to spiral into the void of a black orb humming with stolen life force. The shell's interior lining, laced with Mewtwo's own clone DNA residue, neutralized resistance, converting the captive not just to energy, but to a subdued stasis, ready for reprogramming. These balls weren't forged in some smoky factory. Mewtwo manifested them through sheer telekinesis, materializing dozens from raw elements plucked from New Island's volcanic soil, tungsten for durability, rare earths for the psychic amplifiers. Each one bore a faint, glowing sigma on its surface, a mark of the original Mewtwo supremacy. Tested first on wild Pokémon lured to the island's shores, they proved flawless. A Pidgeot in mid-flight, snatched from the sky. A Golem, armored and defiant, crumpled into submission. Mewtwo watched, unblinking, as the black spheres stacked like trophies in its chamber, a prelude to the reckoning. Word spread through elite trainer circles, an invitation to New Island, promising a tournament beyond imagination. They came, 6 of the world's best, their teams brimming with champions. Pikachu, Charizard, Blastoise, the evolutions of Venusaur, and more, all radiating power honed by years of battle. But as the storm arena loomed, a coliseum of thunder-racked stone ringed by crashing waves, Mewtwo unleashed hell. Cloaked in shadows, it descended, black Pokeballs orbiting like deadly satellites. The terrifying efficiency of the mass capture event at the storm arena unfolded in seconds, a symphony of domination that left trainers reeling. Lightning forked across the sky as Mewtwo's psychic command rippled outward. 20 black balls erupted from its aura, fanning into a perfect sphere around the gathered Pokémon. No drawn-out struggles, no heroic stands. The disruptors hummed a low, bone-chilling throb, and every bond snapped like brittle glass. Pokémon dematerialized in flashes of red, pulled from their balls against their trainers' screams. Pikachu's cheeks sparked futilely before vanishing. Charizard's flames guttered out mid-roar. Blastoise's cannons fired wide, then silence. In under a minute, the arena floor lay empty, save for the glinting black orbs rolling to a halt at Mewtwo's feet. Trainers pounded fists against force fields, their voices lost to the gale as the legendary floated above, eyes burning violet. Not a single escape, not a single failure. Mewtwo gathered the spheres into a levitating procession, ferrying them to the heart of the fortress. Each black ball clicked open in sequence, disgorging its prizes into waiting receptacles. The captured Pokémon, dazed and stripped of will, floated toward their destiny. This was no mere theft, it was the foundation of proof. Clones would rise from these originals, identical in form, superior in purpose. Mewtwo's laughter echoed through the storm, a psychic peal that drowned the thunder. The trainers, imprisoned in energy cages, could only watch as their partners vanished into the island's depths. But the true marvel awaited beyond the captures. Those black balls were merely the gateway, funneling life into the colossal engine pulsing at New Island's core. What happened next inside that machine, how it twisted flesh and soul into armies of the identical, will chill you to your bones. Up next in Chapter 12, the New Island cloning machine. Those black Mewtwo balls didn't just steal Pokémon from their trainers, they funneled them straight into the beating heart of New Island, a colossal cloning apparatus buried deep in the volcano's core. Mewtwo had reverse-engineered more than human capture tech. He'd forged a machine that turned captives into an army overnight, pulsing with the raw fury of his own engineered existence. Picture the descent. Elevators carved from obsidian rock hummed downward, carrying those shimmering black spheres through veins of molten lava cooled into glassy walls. The air grew thick, metallic, laced with the ozone tang of high-voltage conduits, snaking like arteries through the stone. At the chamber's nadir, the machine awaited, not some sterile lab tank like Fuji's relics, but a behemoth spanning football fields, a symphony of whirring gyroscopes, bubbling nutrient vats and towering cylinders that pierced the ceiling like biomechanical spires. This wasn't blind replication. Mewtwo's design demanded perfection, a machine that stripped essence at the molecular level. Captured Pokémon, still locked in stasis within the Mewtwo balls, slotted into receptor ports along the apparatus's equatorial ring, a massive rotating torus of reinforced alloy, etched with psychic amplifiers glowing purple under strain. Hydraulic clamps sealed the balls airtight, then needles finer than spider silk pierced the sphere's casing, drawing out not just blood or tissue, but a jewel harvest. DNA helixes unraveled in femtosecond precision, and neural imprints siphoned from synaptic webs. Here's where the genius twisted into something godlike. The machine extracted DNA and memories simultaneously through a quantum entanglement field, Mewtwo's innovation, blending stolen human gene sequences with his innate psychic prowess. Laser arrays bombarded the Pokémon cells, mapping every base pair while psionic resonators hummed at frequencies only legendaries could sustain. Memories flowed as holographic data streams, battle scars etched in dopamine echoes, loyalty bonds flickering like fireflies, instincts honed across wild evolutions. No sample wasted. The apparatus cross-referenced genetic code against engrams in real time, ensuring clones didn't just mimic form, they echoed experience, down to the twitch of a tail in remembered storms. Nutrient slurry flooded the gestation chambers next, hyper-accelerated broths laced with synthetic growth hormones, Mewtwo's alchemy derived from his own rapid maturation. Why did these clones mature in minutes rather than years? The machine hijacked telomerase enzymes, force multiplying cell division 1,000-fold. Standard Pokémon growth crawls on evolutionary timescales, telomeres capping chromosomes to prevent runaway replication. But Mewtwo overclocked it. Electromagnetic pulses simulated years of sunlight and battle in seconds, weaving muscle from protein scaffolds, forging bones denser than originals through piezoelectric compression. Pikachu emerged, sparking, cheeks bulging with voltage matured beyond infancy. Venusaur 2 unfurled petals veined with venom, roots burrowing instinctively into the chamber floor. All while the torus spun, balancing gravitational forces to prevent tissue collapse under such blasphemous speed. Engineers might gasp at the power draw. Geothermal taps siphoned the island's magma heart, supplemented by psychic batteries charged from Mewtwo's meditations. Safety overrides? None. Feedback loops monitored stability, dissolving unstable batches into vapor if DNA integrity dipped below 99%. Yet perfection eluded even this titan. Clones mirrored originals visually, some bearing subtle purple tinges from the psychic infusion, but their souls, those ineffable sparks, remained hollow echoes, a flaw Mewtwo would confront amid the Storm Arena's chaos. Deep in that core, the machine thrummed like a second heartbeat for New Island, birthing dozens from the 6 trainers' rosters. Pikachu's electric fury doubled. Charizard's flames tripled in wingspans that scraped the cavern roof. Blastoise's shells gleamed wet from accelerated molding, cannons primed with hydrostatic fury. Mewtwo watched from his throne alcove, eyes narrowing as the first cohorts staggered forth, fully formed warriors ready to prove his supremacy. But as vats hissed empty and clones marched upward to the surface coliseum, faint anomalies flickered in the diagnostic readouts. marks that whispered of imperfections no machine could erase. Those imperfections would define everything that followed, etched into flesh as the unmistakable mark of the clone. Up next in Chapter 13, The Mark of the Clone, we'll uncover what set Mewtwo's creations apart forever, pulling back the veil on the scars that doomed them from the start. As the cloning machine in New Island's core chamber hums to life, pumping out fully formed duplicates from the DNA and memories it just harvested, those captured Pokémon don't emerge as flawless mirrors of their originals. No, something deliberate marks them right away. Bold, irregular black patches spreading across their hides like fresh ink on wet parchment. These aren't random flaws from hasty replication. They're the signature of Mewtwo's design, a visual brand burned into every clone in his burgeoning army. Look closely at Pikachu, the first to step forward in that storm-lashed arena. Its cheeks bear the usual red sacs, but now they're framed by jagged black streaks that curl like lightning scars down its neck and shoulders, almost mimicking the electricity it wields but twisted into something darker, more ominous. Venusaur 2 lumbers out next, its massive bulb untouched at first glance, yet examine the edges. Thick black bands encircle its limbs and vine tips, as if the flower itself is wilting under shadow, the patterns asymmetrical, unique to this beast alone. Charizard 2's wings span wide, flames flickering from its tail, but those leathery membranes are veined with pitch-black lines that pulse faintly, drawing the eye to the raw power beneath. Each one carries these markings differently. Squirtle 2's shell etched with swirling voids that swallow light, Blastoise C2's cannons ringed in ebony halos. Even the lesser clones like the Pidgeot duplicates show feather tips dipped in midnight. These distinct black patterns on the skin of Mewtwo's personal army aren't just aesthetic flourishes. They're etched deep during the cloning process, emerging as the tanks drain and the replicas gasp their first breaths. In the uncut origin story, hints of this even in Dr. Fuji's earlier failures. The starter clones like Bulbasaur 2 had faint discolorations before they crumbled, precursors to Mewtwo's refinements. But here, on New Island, the machine perfects it. Witnesses in the film describe how the patterns glow briefly under the chamber's sterile lights, stabilizing as the clones flex their muscles. They're not paint or dye. Spectral analysis from fan breakdowns of the animation frames suggests they're hyperpigmented cells, amplified melanin clusters engineered for permanence. Why black? It absorbs light, makes the clones loom larger in shadows, turning them into silhouettes of dread against the island's perpetual storms. Mewtwo chose to give his clones unique visual identifiers for control, pure and simple. In a sea of identical faces, how does a creator tell his soldiers apart? These weren't mass-produced drones, they were personalized weapons, each pattern a barcode of sorts, logged in Mewtwo's psychic network. Imagine the arena battle, trainers screaming commands, but Mewtwo's mind threads through the black marks like a general scanning regimental flags. Pikachu 2's zigzag scars signal agility flanks. Venusaur 2's banded vines mark poison barrages. It's military precision born from Mewtwo's time in Giovanni's grip, where it learned humans thrive on hierarchy. Without them, the clones blur into chaos. With them, they're a legion, each mark a fingerprint of superiority, whispering that these aren't mere copies. They're evolutions, refined beyond the frail originals. But dig deeper and the intent sharpens to something crueler. Those patterns aren't uniform across the army. They're bespoke, tailored not just for Mewtwo's eyes but for the trainer's horror. Every elite invitee to New Island brought their aces. Pikachu from the orange-haired kid, Venusaur from the green-clad veteran, and out they come, your friends staring back, but better, marked as property of the ultimate life form. The black isn't random, it mimics battle scars or tribal tattoos, evoking ancient warriors, yet it's pristine, flawless, screaming enhancement. Your Pikachu tires after one thunderbolt. Pikachu 2's endless, its black veins throbbing with stolen vitality. It's no accident. Mewtwo, scarred by its own tank-born existence, imprints this to shatter bonds. This feeds straight into the psychological warfare of making trainers face better versions of their friends. Picture the storm arena. Rain lashes down, waves crash, and there they stand, your loyal companion, but with those alien black tattoos crawling over its form, eyes glowing with Mewtwo's implanted rage. The trainers freeze, voices cracking as they call attacks, but the clone doesn't hesitate, doesn't flinch at old loyalties. It's you they fight, or the ghost of you amplified. Ash Ketchum's Pikachu clashes with Pikachu, sparks flying, but the clone's patterns seem to drink the energy, growing bolder. The mimicry breaks spirits first. That's not my Pokémon, they whisper, but it moves like it does, remembers the same tricks, yet executes them without the heart, without fatigue. Mewtwo watches from his throne, psychic probes amplifying the doubt. Are you worthy? Is your bond real, or just a chain? These marks turn the battle into a mirror maze of identity. The originals falter, second-guessing every command, while the clones press on, their black patterns a constant reminder of obsolescence. It's Mewtwo's manifesto made flesh. Humans capture Pokémon, brand them with balls and badges. Now he brands back, proving his dominion. In the aftermath, as Mew and Mewtwo clash and the clones dissolve in energy waves, those patterns fade last, lingering like accusations on the arena floor. Yet some endure, as Mewtwo returns reveals island remnants, patterns softened by peace, a quiet rebellion against Erasia. The survivors huddle in hidden coves, their marks now camouflage among volcanic rocks, a testament to Mewtwo's evolving mercy. But those initial designs, they were weapons of the mind, long before the fists flew. And speaking of that electric showdown that left even Mewtwo questioning combat's cost, wait until you hear about Pikachu and the ethics of combat. Those jagged black R marks etched across the clone's hides weren't just Mewtwo's signature of ownership. They pulsed like veins of shadow under the storm-lit arena of New Island, marking the birth of warriors engineered for one purpose: to shatter the illusion of the original supremacy. And no clone embodied that raw, unbridled intent quite like Pikachu, the electric fury cloned straight from Ash Ketchum's loyal Pikachu. Picture the moment of its creation, deep in the glowing heart of Mewtwo's colossal cloning machine. Ash's Pikachu had been ripped from his side just hours earlier, snatched mid-battle by one of those sinister Mewtwo Balls during the relentless typhoon that battered the island's shores. The black sphere hummed with stolen energy as it descended into the machine's core, a vast chamber of throbbing conduits and bubbling nutrient vats that dwarfed even Giovanni's wildest labs. There, under Mewtwo's psychic oversight, the process unfolded with mechanical precision. DNA strands unraveled like golden lightning from the captive Pokémon, woven together with synthetic accelerators drawn from Mewtwo's own genetic blueprint. Memories flickered across holographic displays, flashes of battles won, thunderbolts unleashed, the warmth of Ash's hand on its cheek, all imprinted to forge not just a body, but a mind loyal to its creator. What emerged from the gestation tank mere minutes later was no fragile lab infant like Dr. Fuji's failed starters. Pikachu burst forth fully grown, its yellow fur slick with birthing fluids, those black R patterns stark against its cheeks and tail. But this wasn't a mirror image. Mewtwo had twisted the formula, amplifying the aggression latent in every Pikachu's spark. Where the original carried a spark of playful defiance, Pikachu thrummed with pure engineered rage, a personality hard-coded for dominance. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural crimson hue, cheeks bulging with excess electricity that arced uncontrollably, scorching the tank's walls as it roared a challenge that echoed through the fortress. This clone didn't question its existence. It lived to conquer, its every nerve wired for the Storm Arena's bloodless war. You can feel the tension building as Mewtwo herded his army into position, the clone's markings gleaming under the artificial lights. Pikachu led the charge among the electric types, its tail lashing like a whip, sparks dancing across the flooded floor. Mewtwo's voice boomed telepathically across the chamber, declaring his gospel: clones surpass originals, free from the frailties of nature. To prove it, He pitted copy against source, brother against brother. Ash's Pikachu faced its double across the waterlogged arena, the air thick with ozone and the distant howl of the typhoon. Pikachu lunged first, not with a calculated thunderbolt, but a feral quick attack, slamming into its original with shoulders ablaze. Then came the slap, the moment that cut through the fury like a thunderclap in silence. Pikachu reeled back, cheeks puffed in fury, and delivered a vicious open-palm strike across the original's face. The sound cracked sharp over the waves, Pikachu's head snapping sideways, a red welt blooming on its cheek. Water sprayed from the impact, and for a heartbeat the arena held its breath. This wasn't mere violence, it was Mewtwo's philosophy made flesh, a clone asserting superiority through brute mimicry. Yet in that slap lay the profound futility of it all. The original Pikachu staggered, eyes wide not with hate, but sorrow. It could have retaliated thundershock for thundershock, a mirror of destruction. Instead, it stood firm, refusing to strike back, its body trembling not from pain, but from an empathy the clone could never replicate. One slap echoed the hollowness of cloned existence, power without heart, aggression without purpose. That refusal pierced Mewtwo's iron logic like a flaw in his own genetic code. He had built Pikachu to embody perfection, stronger, faster, unburdened by the original's sentimental chains. But watching the original Pikachu lower its gaze, choosing mercy over combat, exposed the lie. What defined true strength if not the will to spare a foe? Mewtwo's army mirrored the trainer's Pokémon in form and fury, yet lacked the spark of individuality, the soul-forged choice that turned violence into something more. Pikachu snarled, electricity coiling uselessly around its pores, but the original stillness mocked it. In that arena's haze, the ethics of combat unraveled. Was supremacy measured in blows landed, or in the restraint to withhold them? Mewtwo floated above, his psychic field flickering with doubt as the slap's symbolism rippled outward clones as echoes, destined to fade without the original's quiet defiance. Deeper still, this clash probed the shadows of Mewtwo's own birth. Dr. Fuji's tanks had birthed failures that withered in agony, their aggression undirected, personalities dissolving into genetic soup. Pikachu, though, was Mewtwo's triumph and tragedy, a deliberate escalation, its hyper-aggressive core drawn from the rage Mewtwo felt toward his creators. Yet the original Pikachu's pacifism echoed Mew's own elusive grace, challenging Mewtwo to question if combat was evolution's pinnacle or merely a cage of his making. The humid air grew heavier, waves lapping at the platform's edges as Pikachu paced, its black marks seeming to writhe like accusations. The standoff stretched, Pikachu's sparks illuminating the doubt in Mewtwo's eyes until the broader battle ignited around them. But that explosive clash of originals against their shadowed twins, where every thunderbolt and claw strike tested the boundaries of creation itself, that's the heart-pounding saga waiting in Chapter 15, the battle of the originals versus clones. That single slap from Pikachu echoed like a thunderclap across the storm-lashed arena on New Island. But it was merely the spark igniting the inferno. What followed wasn't a skirmish, it was total war. Originals pitted against their mirror images in a spectacle of raw fury that tested every limit of flesh and spirit. Pikachu squared off against Pikachu first, their cheeks crackling with identical electric fury. Yellow fur blurred into lightning storms, bolts arcing wildly as they collided mid-air, slamming into the slick stone floor with bone-jarring force. Pikachu dodged a thunderbolt only to take a vicious tackle, rolling across puddles that hissed and steamed from the residual energy. Pikachu pressed the advantage, its eyes glowing with that engineered rage, but Pikachu fired back a quick attack, tails whipping like live wires, forcing the clone to stagger. Nearby, Venusaur roared against Venusaur 2, massive vines lashing out in a tangle of green fury. Petals unfurled like battering rams, razor leaf slicing through the humid air. drawing thin lines of blood on hides that should have been unbreakable. The originals fought with the fire of survival, every move honed by bonds with their trainers, while the clones mirrored them flawlessly, attacks landing with mechanical precision, draining the fight from weary limbs. Charizard's flames clashed with Charizard 2's in aerial dogfights, wings beating against hurricane winds, fireballs exploding into gouts of steam that scalded scales and blurred vision. Blastoise shelled up against Blastoise, hydro pumps colliding in pressurized blasts that shattered arena pillars, sending shards flying like shrapnel. The ground trembled under the weight of their charges, water mixing with sweat and blood to form a muddy slurry that sucked at paws and feet. Trainers shouted commands from the sidelines, voices hoarse over the gale, but the Pokémon pushed on, breaths coming in ragged gasps, muscles burning from the endless cycle of strike and counterstrike. This was the brutal, stamina-draining conflict between the two armies, a grinding attrition where no side gained ground for long. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity under the relentless storm, energy reserves plummeting as identical moves exhausted identical bodies. A cloned Pidgeot dive-bombed its original, talons raking feathers, only to be hurled back by a hurricane gust, both crashing into the waves below, resurfacing with weary cries. Alakazam locked Psybeams with Alakazam 2, minds straining in psychic duels that left them trembling, spoons clattering from telekinetic grips. Mewtwo hovered above it all, its tail swaying like a metronome of judgment, purple aura pulsing in sync with the chaos. From its vantage, the battle unfolded not as triumph, but revelation. Every cry of pain twisted the same originals crumpling under clone assaults, clones reeling from original fury. A Gengar faded through shadow balls, only to solidify and howl as its double struck true. A cloned Raiden charged, horn cracking against its counterpart's armor, both bellowing in shared agony. Mewtwo's mind probed deeper, scanning the neural storms, the dopamine crashes, the lactic acid floods, the raw synaptic screams. Clones and originals feel the same pain. It realized, the thought rippling through its consciousness like a cold wave. No engineered edge dulled the hurt. Suffering leveled them all, copies no less alive in their torment. The armies faltered then, collisions slowing to desperate grapples, fur matted, eyes dimming with fatigue. Mewtwo's grand experiment teetered, superiority dissolving in the universal grind of exhaustion. But before the verdict could settle, a new presence pierced the tempest. A pink shimmer materialized at the arena's heart, compact and ancient, hovering with effortless grace. Mew, the progenitor, the unaltered dream from which Mewtwo sprang. Its eyes locked on its creation, not with wrath, but a profound, wordless challenge. Mewtwo descended, the air thickening with psychic pressure, two titans now facing off amid the panting wreckage of their proxies. What unfolded was no mere brawl, but the intervention of Mew and the clash of psychic ideologies. Mewtwo's doctrine of artificial ascension crashing against Mew's creed of natural harmony. Mewtwo broadcast its manifesto telepathically. I am the pinnacle, forged beyond weakness, clones my proof of evolution's obsolescence. Mew responded in visions, flooding minds with primal meadows, wild evolutions unbound by labs, equality and diversity rather than domination through duplication. Psychic waves collided, warping reality, barriers of light shattering, gravity inverting in bursts that flung debris skyward. Mewtwo unleashed shadow balls laced with Psywave fury, Mew countering with transformative barriers, turning attacks into harmless auroras. The storm itself bent to their will, lightning forking at their command, waves rising like serpents. Mewtwo's rage peaked, a mega punch empowered by barrier-shielded might, but Mew dodged with transformed fluidity, retaliating with ancient pulse that seared Mewtwo's hide, forcing it to confront its own fragility. Deeper still, the ideologies warred. Mewtwo saw humanity's hand as salvation, cloning as destiny's hammer. Mew embodied the wild's whisper, originals sacred in their imperfections, copies mere echoes destined to fade. Telepathic barrages escalated, Mewtwo probing Mew's essence, pure, unscarred, while Mew unveiled Mewtwo's buried doubts. The Fuji tank's ghosts, the starter clones' silent graves. Pain echoed anew, not just physical, but existential, binding creator and created in mutual understanding. As their clash raged, the armies below watched, breaths sinking in exhausted truce, the battle's futility laid bare. Mewtwo faltered mid-assault, a psychic pulse from Mew halting its onslaught, visions of peaceful multiplicity washing away supremacy's illusion. The clones shimmered, their forms destabilizing not from defeat, but released dissolving into light as Mewtwo's will wavered. Yet, even as equilibrium dawned, a shadow loomed larger, Ash Ketchum, heart unbroken amid the fray, stepping forward in a desperate bid that would demand everything. What sacrifice would the boy make to bridge this divide once and for all? That's the heart-wrenching turn in Chapter 16, the sacrifice of Ash Ketchum. Stick around, because you won't believe how it changes everything. As the storm arena trembled under the weight of exhausted bodies, Mewtwo hovered above it all, his piercing gaze dissecting the scene. Clones and originals alike slumped to the ground, their shared agony echoing through every labored breath, every twitch of fur and scale. No difference in their suffering, none at all. But the psychic legend wasn't done observing. The true test of superiority, he believed, lay not just in battle, but in what came after, when wills shattered and only raw essence remained. Ash Ketchum, that unyielding trainer from Pallet Town, refused to let it end there. He'd fought through the tempest to reach New Island, his Pikachu at his side, driven by a bond that Mewtwo could scarcely comprehend. Now, with both armies on the brink, Ash leaped into the heart of the fray. "Stop!" he shouted, arms outstretched, positioning himself squarely between the faltering clones and their originals. Pikachu faced off against Pikachu, their cheeks sparking faintly, eyes locked in mirror-image fury. The air crackled with residual energy, bolts of thunder and psychic waves crisscrossing like dying lightning. In that pivotal clash, Ash became the barrier. A surge erupted, Pikachu's thunderbolt merging with Pikachu's in a blinding explosion of yellow light. It slammed into him without mercy, the force lifting his small frame off the stone floor. His body went rigid, skin paling to an unnatural grey, veins glowing faintly, as if the life force itself was unraveling. He collapsed, motionless, a statue of stone where a boy once stood. The arena fell silent, save for the howl of wind through the cavernous dome. Mewtwo watched, intrigued. Was this human any different from the Pokémon he duplicated? Could a life not born in a tank bridge the unbridgeable divide? That moment, a human life bridges the gap between clone and original, unfolded right there in the rubble-strewn center. Ash's sacrifice wasn't planned heroism, it was instinct. The same fierce loyalty that pulsed through every Pokémon, cloned or not. His form, petrified and lifeless, mirrored the fragility Mewtwo had seen in his own failed siblings back in the labs. Bulbasaur 2 crumbling in its tank, Charmander 2 flickering out like a weak flame. Yet Ash represented something unprecedented, a natural-born soul volunteering to embody the clone's pain. To prove that division was illusion, Mewtwo descended closer, telepathic voice probing the air. "What have you done, human? Your end changes nothing." Pikachu was the first to react. The little electric mouse staggered forward, tiny paws scraping against the cold floor, eyes wide with disbelief. A whimper escaped, building into a wail that pierced the gloom. Tears welled in those black eyes, spilling over in shimmering trails. One by one, the others joined, originals nuzzling their counterparts, clones hesitating before mirroring the grief. Venusaur and Venusaur 2, their massive forms heaving, released droplets that steamed on the ground. Charizard's roar softened to a mournful rumble, fiery tears hissing into vapor. Even the most battle-hardened, like Blastoise and its clone, bowed heads, saline streams carving paths through dust-caked shells. How the tears of the Pokémon acted as a catalyst for restoration began as a subtle glow. Those tears, pure distillations of unbreakable bonds, pooled around Ash's stone form. They seeped into cracks in the petrification, reacting like some ancient elixir against the curse of lifeless mimicry. Mewtwo analyzed it in real time, his mind racing through data from Fuji's logs, the instability of clones, the void where souls should anchor. But these weren't lab chemicals. They were emotional essence forged in the fires of friendship that no machine could replicate. The glow intensified, spreading from Ash's chest outward, veins pulsing with golden light. Stone flaked away, color returning to his cheeks, his fingers twitching. The restoration accelerated. Ash's eyes fluttered open, gasping as life flooded back. Pikachu leaped onto his chest, nuzzling frantically, while the arena's Pokémon gathered close, their tears now a collective river of renewal. Mewtwo floated nearer, scanning the miracle with psychic probes. The human boy lived, not as a clone, but affirmed in his originality, yet the act had fused them all. Clones gazed at originals without enmity, recognizing the shared spark. Mewtwo's voice boomed, resonant with newfound clarity. The circumstances of birth are irrelevant, he declared, the words hanging like thunder. Man, Pokémon, clone, they all cry the same tears, feel the same joys and pains. I was blind to it, chasing shadows of superiority. That revelation reshaped everything. Mewtwo, born in a tank from Mew's essence, had raged against his origins, replicating that rage in his army. He'd seen Dr. Fuji's failures, amber dissolving in her pod, the starter clones withering before they could walk, as proof of natural weakness. But Ash's bridge, sealed by those tears, exposed the lie. Life's value lay in its capacity for connection, not its genesis. The clones stirred, no longer puppets, their black markings fading slightly as autonomy bloomed. Mew descended then, the playful ancestor whose DNA birthed this chaos, and the true clash Mewtwo versus Mew unleashed cataclysmic power that would test these truths further. Yet, even as harmony tentatively bloomed, Mewtwo knew the fragile peace demanded a reckoning. The cloning machine hummed ominously in the depths below, its chambers still warm from creation. What came next would erase boundaries forever, in a cataclysm that spared no one. We'll uncover it all in Chapter 17, the Great Erasia, where the island itself unravels and every clone faces oblivion. As the tears of every Pokémon, clone and original alike, cascaded down and revived the fallen, a hush fell over the storm-ravaged arena on New Island. Mewtwo hovered there, its massive form silhouetted against the clearing skies, eyes glowing with a newfound clarity. The psychic energy that had fueled destruction now pulsed with something quieter, regret perhaps, or the weight of creation's true cost. Ash Ketchum stirred, his body whole again, bridging not just lives but worlds. Yet, victory tasted like ash in Mewtwo's mind. These trainers, these witnesses to its army of clones, they carried knowledge that could unravel everything. Mewtwo turned its gaze to the humans below. Sailor, Ferdinand, Corey, Denny, and the others, their Pokémon trembling at their sides. The Pikachu too, that had slapped its original counterpart moments before, now stood docile, its black markings fading slightly under the dawn light. Mewtwo sensed the threads of memory weaving through each mind, the Mewtwo Balls snatching their partners mid-air, the grotesque hum of the cloning machine deep in the island's core, the brutal clashes where pain echoed identically between copy and source. If even one tale escaped, hunters would come. Giovanni's shadow loomed largest, his rocket ambitions already stirring in distant labs. The world beyond Kanto's leagues, Johto's whispers, would brand Mewtwo's children as abominations, prizes to be captured, dissected, remade. In that suspended breath, Mewtwo made its decision to wipe the memories of the trainers and the world, not out of malice but mercy. A psychic veil, vast and absolute, would descend. It began with the trainers first, their eyes glazing over as Mewtwo's power delved into synapses, unraveling the day's horrors like frayed film reels. visions of cloned Venusaur 2 crushing boulders, Charizard 2 breathing flames that mirrored the original's fury, all dissolved into fog. The invitations to New Island blurred into vague dreams of a tournament that never was. Their Pokémon, too, felt the gentle purge, no lingering scars from battles that tested the soul's uniqueness. Mewtwo extended the Erasia outward, a ripple across oceans and skies, touching news whispers in Saffron City, rumors in Vermilion ports. Satellites flickered, archives glitched. The global consciousness forgot the storm, the clones, the godlike showdown with Mew. Only echoes remained, faint as half-remembered nightmares. But Erasia alone couldn't safeguard what Mewtwo had wrought. Dozens of clones stirred around it, Pikachu toe rubbing its cheeks, the full lineup of evolutions from Bulbasaur 2's line to the towering Tyranitar, each bearing those deliberate black tattoos like badges of engineered destiny. They were fully grown, battle-hardened, but vulnerable. New Island's fortress, once a bastion, now lay exposed, its cloning machine shattered in the Mew clash. Mewtwo calculated the risks: human encroachment, rival legendaries drawn by residual psychic hum, the instability of clone DNA that had doomed Dr. Fuji's earlier failures. Relocating an entire army demanded precision, teleportation waves calibrated for mass transit, scouting psychic probes for hidden refuges. Mewtwo orchestrated it flawlessly, cloaking the exodus in illusion. One by one, the clones vanished in azure flashes, reappearing in staggered groups to avoid detection. Logistics unfolded like a symphony of the mind. Aquatic clones like the Blastoise 2 contingent ferried via Lapras clones through midnight currents, evading shipping lanes. Flyers, Pidgeot 2, Fearow 2 scouted ahead, mapping ley lines of psychic energy for low-signature jumps. Ground pounders like the Rhydone army burrowed temporary paths, emerging in mist-shrouded valleys. Mewtwo personally anchored the core group, its power sustaining life forces through the strain, memories of their creation intact but tempered with purpose. Food caches manifested from pilfered wild stores, shelters woven from environmental fire manipulation. No clone was left behind. Even the damaged ones, ribs heaving from the original's counterstrikes, were cradled in stasis fields. The journey spanned days, a nomadic ballet across Kanto's fringes into uncharted wilds until safety beckoned. This pivotal shift marked the seamless transition from Mewtwo Strikes Back to the Mewtwo Returns era. The first chapter closed on redemption's edge, clones and originals parting as equals, humans none the wiser. But the special picked up threads years later, revealing a thriving colony under Mewtwo's watchful eye, those same black-marked warriors now tending gardens, sparring playfully, far from prying eyes. Whispers of poachers and old foes tested their haven, but Mewtwo's lessons endured. Clones weren't lesser, just different paths from the same spark. And as threats circled closer, Mewtwo sought the ultimate sanctuary, a place etched in legend where even the winds guarded secrets. That refuge, Mount Quain, the sanctuary, called to them with promises of eternal seclusion. What perils did it hide, and how did Mewtwo's army claim it? With the trainer's memories erased and the world none the wiser, Mewtwo guided his surviving clones across vast oceans and treacherous skies to a place untouched by human ambition. That sanctuary lay high atop Mount Quain, a colossal peak rising like a forgotten sentinel from the Earth's core. Its slopes cloaked in eternal mists that veiled the truth from prying eyes below. Nestled at the mountain's hidden crown was a secret plateau, a vast emerald cradle suspended thousands of feet above the crashing waves. Sheer granite walls encircled it, unscalable by any but those who could defy gravity, their faces etched by millennia of wind and rain into natural battlements that turned away storms and intruders alike. Lush valleys folded into the stone heart, fed by underground springs that burst forth in crystalline cascades, weaving through fields of wild berries and towering evergreens that whispered secrets to the clouds. Crystal clear lakes mirrored the endless blue sky, unbroken save for the occasional shadow of a glider Pokémon wheeling overhead. This was no barren exile, it was a paradise forged by nature's indifference to mankind, where sunlight filtered through perpetual veils of vapor, bathing the land in a soft, perpetual glow that healed more than wounds. Here, the clones arrived weary from their battles, their forms still bearing the faint black markings Mewtwo had etched upon them as badges of their engineered birth. Pikachu, the fierce spark that had once slapped its original in futile rage, now padded silently across dew-kissed meadows. Venusaur 2's massive frame lumbered through fern-choked groves, its petals unfurling, not in combat but to shelter younger clones from the chill dawn. They scattered at first, instincts honed in the arena, urging them to claim territory, to fight for dominance as they had been programmed. But Mewtwo watched from a crystalline spire, his psychic presence a gentle tether, reminding them that freedom meant choice, not chains. In those early days, adaptation came not through conquest but surrender. Without human masters barking commands or Pokeballs dictating their every move, the clones confronted the void of purpose. No trainers to impress, no battles to win, only the rhythm of the wild to answer to. Pikachu learned to channel its thunder, not at foes but at storm clouds, drawing lightning to nourish the plateau's hidden orchards, ensuring fruits ripened even in the leanest seasons. Squirtle survivors, echoes of Dr. Fuji's fragile starters, dove into the plateau's geothermal pools, their water jets now sculpting natural basins that caught rainwater for the herd. They formed loose packs, not armies, sharing hunts under the stars where Charizard 2's flames lit communal gatherings, roasting wild game while stories of the great Erasia passed from mind to mind in telepathic murmurs. Bird Pokémon clones soared in synchronized flocks, scouting the misty perimeter for threats, their cries a harmonious patrol that blended with the wind's howl. Ground dwellers like Rhydon duplicates burrowed vast networks of tunnels, fortifying the plateau against avalanches, their rocky hides camouflaged by moss that grew thicker with each passing moon. Even the most volatile among them, those infused with Mewtwo's own volatile essence, found solace in meditation atop windswept crags, their psychic hums syncing with the mountain's ancient pulse. Reproduction eluded them at first, their cloned genetics a sterile echo, but nature intervened subtly. Some paired bonds deepened, fostering a surrogate family structure where elders taught evasion over aggression, harmony over hierarchy. They thrived not as copies, but as a new lineage, their markings fading like scars into proud tattoos of survival. Central to this rebirth flowed the waters of Mount Quain, purity incarnate, born from aquifers deep within the earth's fiery veins, filtered through layers of quartz and obsidian until they emerged as liquid starlight. Unlike the tainted tanks of their creation, where chemical soups bred instability and swift decay, these springs carried no residue of laboratories or ambition. Clones who drank deeply felt it immediately, a tingling renewal coursing through synthetic veins, mending the microfractures in their DNA that had doomed Fuji's early failures. Pikachu's fur regained its electric sheen, sparks dancing brighter without the fatigue of endless combat. Wounds from the arena clashes knit overnight, scars vanishing as if the battle had been a dream. Mewtwo himself immersed in hidden grottos, the water amplifying his powers while soothing the rage that once consumed him, allowing visions of futures unmarred by creators. Legends among the clones spoke of these waters as Quain's gift, a counterpoint to Mew's elusive purity, healing not just body, but the soul's forged fractures. Those who lingered too long in the pools emerged transformed, their movements fluid, eyes clearer, as if the mountain leached away the artificial haste of their origins. It bound them to the land, turning sanctuary into home, where the air hummed with contentment and the nights echoed with soft, unified breaths. Yet peace on such heights draws shadows. Whispers of old enemies, stirring far below, would soon test this fragile idyll. In Chapter 19, The Return of Team Rocket, discover how Giovanni's relentless hunger clawed its way back to threaten everything Mewtwo built. High above the world on Mount Quain's hidden plateau, the clones had carved out a fragile existence, roaming misty meadows where wildflowers bowed under perpetual frost, their bodies finally syncing with the rhythms of untamed nature. No commands, no battles, just the quiet pulse of survival. Pikachu chased electric sparks through the underbrush alongside true-born Pikachu, while Venusaur's vines wove shelters from the biting winds, a harmony born from Mewtwo's hard-won mercy. Yet shadows lengthen even on the highest peaks, and far below, in the labyrinthine underbelly of Team Rocket's empire, Giovanni never forgot what he'd lost. That towering figure, cloaked in his signature Persian fur coat, paced the sterile glow of his command chamber, walls lined with holographic maps pulsing like veins. Mewtwo wasn't just a creation, it was his property, forged from his coffers, a weapon of unparalleled might that had slipped his grasp years ago. The clones, too, those dozens of perfect replicas from the New Island debacle, represented billions in black market potential, genetic gold dust he'd funded through Dr. Fuji's doomed tanks. Giovanni's persistent hunt for his lost property burned hotter than ever, fueled by whispers from defected agents and satellite scans, picking up anomalous psychic signatures from Quain's heights. He wouldn't let pacifist delusions steal his empire's future. Agents reported back in hushed tones. The boss had sunk fortunes into countermeasures, obsessing over recapture tech that could neutralize even Mewtwo's godlike telekinesis. And there it was, unveiled in a chamber humming with cryogenic mist, the combat cell technology, sleek orbs no larger than Ultra Balls but laced with neural suppressants and reinforced alloy cages. These weren't your standard Pokeballs, they were engineered nightmares, deploying microdrones on impact to flood the target with paralytic gas, binding psychic energies in electromagnetic webs derived from reverse-engineered Mewtwo DNA. Tests on lesser psychics had been ruthless, wild Alakazam crumpling mid-teleport, their minds locked in stasis pods. Giovanni smiled thinly as prototypes gleamed under lab lights, envisioning swarms descending on Quain to drag his property home, clones and creator alike. Word reached Mewtwo first, a psychic ripple slicing through the plateau's calm like a winter gale. From his eyrie overlooking glacial crevasses, the legendary clone felt the intrusion, a familiar malice probing the edges of his sanctuary. Visions flooded him, Giovanni's unyielding gaze, the sterile tanks where his failed siblings had dissolved into nutrient slurry, Bulbasaur's final, gurgling plea echoing in vats of failed pink fluid. Pacifism had become Mewtwo's creed after Ash's tears thawed his rage. A vow to shield these siblings, the Pikachu pack sparring harmlessly now, Squirtlet's echoes reborn in stronger forms from humanity's grasp. But protection demanded action, and as Team Rocket's aircraft pierced the clouds, engines growling like enraged beasts, Mewtwo's fists clenched against the stone. The dilemma tore at him, psychic storms raging internally while the clones frolicked unaware below. Strike back, and he'd become the monster Giovanni accused him of being, violence begetting violence in an endless cycle that had already claimed his embryonic kin. Charmander's flames flickering out in futile defiance. Yet, inaction meant chains for them all, combat cells snapping shut on the very freedoms he'd gifted. Mewtwo hovered silently, purple aura flickering like northern lights, weighing the scales, mercy for the world or survival for his blood. Hovercraft touched down on icy ledges, black-suited operatives fanning out with those insidious orbs at the ready, their leader barking coordinates into comms. Clones scattered at the first psychic alarm, Venusaur's roar shaking snow from pines as Pikachu's cheeks sparked in primal fury. Mewtwo descended, a shadow blotting the moon, his voice booming across the plateau in a telepathic thunder that halted the invaders mid-stride. They are not yours to claim. But Giovanni's voice crackled back from a lead ship's speakers, oily and insistent. They've always been mine. Mewtwo, my investment, my army. Return, or watch your paradise burn. Combat cells whirred to life, launching in salvos that arced through the night, forcing Mewtwo to erect barriers that strained his very essence. One by one, he deflected them, each impact sending shockwaves through his frame, reminders of the tanks that birthed him. A near miss grazed Pikachu, the clone staggering as paralytics nipped at its nerves, eyes wide with the terror of recapture. Mewtwo's resolve cracked then, pacifism yielding to the raw imperative of kin, siblings not by blood alone, but by the shared curse of creation. He swept forward, dismantling drones with precision blasts, buying time as the clones rallied behind him. The battle lines drew taut under Quain's stars, Team Rocket's tech clashing against cloned fury, but deeper questions loomed in Mewtwo's mind. Could he end this without blood? Operatives fell back under relentless psychic assault, their combat cells shattering like glass eggs against Mewtwo's will, yet Giovanni's fleet circled relentlessly, reinforcements inbound. The plateau, once sanctuary, now echoed with laser fire and Pokémon cries, the clones fighting not for dominance but for the lives Mewtwo had promised them. In that crucible, the true test unfolded, not just of power, but of the fragile peace he'd sworn to uphold. And as dawn crept over the ridges, painting the snow crimson, one certainty emerged. Survival here would demand choices that echoed back to the origins of every clone. But what ruthless trials awaited those who endured, where only the strongest could claim a future amid the fallout? Find out in Chapter 20, The Survival of the Fittest. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. Even as Giovanni's combat cells prowled the misty fringes of Mount Quain, probing for weaknesses in the clone's hidden sanctuary, a quiet revolution stirred among the survivors. These synthetic beings, born not from eggs or wild births, but from the cold hum of Mewtwo's cloning machine, had begun to defy their engineered limits in ways no human scientist could have predicted. You can almost feel the crisp mountain air up there, thick with the scent of alpine herbs and damp earth, as the clone army settled into their new existence. Freed from the arena of clones versus originals, they scattered across the plateau's rugged terraces, carving out territories amid jagged peaks and hidden valleys. But survival demanded more than hiding. The weak faded into the snow-swept slopes, their artificial cells unraveling under the strain of altitude and isolation. Only the strongest endured, adapting in real time to a world that tested every fiber of their duplicated DNA. Take the clones of the Kanto starters, those first echoes of Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle that Mewtwo had replicated from the trainer's prized companions. Crafted as fully grown Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise right from the vats, they carried the scars of their origins, subtle genetic instabilities that made lesser copies crumble. Yet, against all odds, these three pressed on. Their synthetic bulbs, flames, and shells, engineered for instant maturity, began to pulse with unforeseen vitality. Over months of foraging in the unforgiving terrain, exposure to Quain's mineral-rich springs and rare pollen storms triggered latent evolutions within their frameworks. The Venusaur clone's bulb swelled not just with stored energy, but with mutations that hardened its vines against the freezing winds. The Charizard clone's wings stretched further, flames burning hotter to melt ice barriers during hunts. And the Blastoise clone's cannons pressurized beyond design specs, drawing power from geothermal vents hidden in the rock. These weren't mere copies anymore. Their bodies rewired themselves, overwriting imperfections through sheer environmental pressure, proving that even lab-born life could seize the raw pulse of evolution. At the heart of this transformation stood two undeniable leaders, Venusaur 2 and Blastoise 2. Venusaur 2, with its massive frame anchoring the eastern meadows, became the nurturer and strategist. You'd see it there at dawn, tendrils weaving through the soil to cultivate vast patches of nutrient-dense ferns, feeding the younger clones who struggled with their unstable metabolisms. It orchestrated patrols, using spore clouds to mask scents from rocket drones, and mediated disputes over scarce berries with a calm, rumbling authority that echoed Mewtwo's own intellect. Blastoise 2 commanded the western cliffs, its hulking shell a living fortress. It drilled the combat-ready clones in formations drawn from the arena battle's memories, hydro pumps arcing like artillery to shatter avalanches, creating safe paths through the passes. Together, they formed an unspoken council, Venusaur's growth fostering sustenance and healing, Blastoiseau's might ensuring defense. Under their watch, the community didn't just survive, it hardened into a self-sustaining force, repelling scouting parties with coordinated ambushes that left combat cells shattered in the ravines below. This leadership birthed an internal culture, unlike anything in the wild Pokémon herds, a society forged in the fire of shared synthetic trauma. Clones gathered in cavern circles at night, their markings faintly glowing under bioluminescent fungi, recounting the strikes back battle through telepathic flashes. No hierarchies of species dominated. Instead, roles emerged organically from aptitude. Pikachu variants, nimble and electric, wired primitive alarm networks across the peaks, zapping intruders with chained thunderbolts. Flying types like Pidgeotto scouted horizons, their cries a coded language warning of Giovanni's airships. Even the fragile ones contributed, like the Oddisto that cultivated hallucinogenic mushrooms to disorient pursuers. Rituals took shape too, communal sheds of damaged plating or bulbs, symbolizing rebirth beyond their cloned births. Conflicts resolved not through brawls but trials of endurance, climbing sheer faces or withstanding blizzards, echoing the survival of the fittest that weeded out the frail. Bonds formed that transcended DNA matches. A cloned Raiden might guard a Taurostu's young, teaching them to charge through snowdrifts. Whispers spread of Mewtwo's distant oversight, a psychic thread binding them, but here on Quain, they owned their destiny, a culture of resilience where every clone etched its mark on the mountain's stone. As Team Rocket's shadows lengthened, these adaptations turned the sanctuary into an impenetrable bastion. Venusaur's meadows concealed pit traps laced with paralytic sap, while Blastoiseau's cannons turned geysers into weapons of steam and shrapnel. The culture deepened, with elder clones etching glow-in-the-dark murals on cave walls, scenes of the Great Erasia, Ash's sacrifice, their escape. Young ones, born not cloned, but from natural unions in this free era, learned the lore, carrying it forward. Pain from the past fueled purpose. They weren't property anymore, but guardians of a legacy Mewtwo had ignited. Yet, amid this thriving defiance, rumors filtered through the telepathic network, whispers of another shadow, one tied to Mewtwo's very essence. What secrets did this second Mewtwo hold, and how might it upend everything the mountain had built? We'll uncover that in Chapter 21, the second Mewtwo mystery. As Venusaur and Blastoise stood sentinel over their evolved kin, vines twisting through ancient crags and water cannons, carving hidden streams on Mount Quain's unforgiving slopes, the world below churned with secrets long buried. A second Mewtwo had awakened, not from the ashes of Dr. Fuji's tanks or Giovanni's shadowed labs, but from an entirely new forge of forbidden science. This clone emerged in the dense, fog-shrouded forests of Unova, a psychic titan locked in cryogenic slumber within a colossal facility that hummed with alien machinery. When Genosect's relentless hive mind army shattered the ice encasing it, this Mewtwo didn't lash out in primal fury like its predecessor. No, it rose with a quiet resolve, its tail flickering like a violet flame against the encroaching chaos, shielding a ragtag band of wild Pokémon from the mechanized onslaught. You can almost hear the crackle of psychic barriers forming in the humid air, the ground trembling as Genosect's lasers scorched the undergrowth mere inches away. Investigating the Mewtwo from Genosect and the legend awakened pulls back the veil on a timeline fractured by human ambition. This isn't the raging god born from Mew's stolen lash in the Kanto labs. Genetic scans implied during the film's climax reveal a creation process echoing Fuji's neural enhancement protocols, yet twisted through lenses of advanced cryostasis and synthetic armoring, tubes pulsing with luminescent fluids that no rocket operative would recognize. Scattered data logs, glimpsed in holographic flickers amid the ruins, point to a rogue consortium of bioengineers, perhaps ex-Pokémon League defectors or shadowy corporate rivals who scavenged Mew DNA fragments from forgotten black market trades. They didn't chase Giovanni's dream of domination or Fuji's ghost of revival. Theirs was a colder calculus, a weaponized guardian for an era of escalating legendary threats. Evidence that a different scientific group attempted to replicate Fuji's work litters the wreckage of that Unova bunker. The cloning vats there bore no Team Rocket insignias, no amber-tinted revival chambers haunted by a dead girl's echo. Instead, sleek metallic pods lined frost-rimed walls, etched with proprietary seals from an unmarked syndicate, symbols matching whispers of the New Age Genesis project, a covert initiative blending human tech with ancient Colossian relics. Fuji's originals dissolved in organic failure. These thrived in suspended animation, their cells stabilized by particle accelerators humming at frequencies that warped local gravity. This group cracked the instability code through trial and error horrors we never see. Phantom clones reduced to vapor in preliminary runs, their essences fueling iterative breakthroughs until perfection encased this Mewtwo in ice for decades. What sets this entity apart burns brightest in its core. The original Mewtwo seethed with existential wrath, a storm of telekinetic gales born from betrayal, viewing all life as inferior copies unworthy of its singularity. This second one? It cradles vulnerability like a fragile egg. Gentle eyes, softer than amethyst under moonlight, scan the forest floor for the weakest fledgling's first passage, trembling in the crossfire, dearling frozen mid-leap. It doesn't monologue about supremacy, it communes silently, psychic waves weaving bonds of quiet loyalty with its charges. Where the first Mewtwo shattered mountains in rage, this one dances through barrages, body blurring into afterimages that mock Genosect's precision strikes. And then there's the mega evolution capability of the second clone, a power that rewrites the rules of its very existence. As the Genosect Quain's fusion form loomed, blotting out the canopy with crimson malice, a keystone embedded in a fallen trainer's relic pulsed in sync with Mewtwo's hiddenite. Armor erupted across its frame, sleek pauldrons of psychic crystal, wings unfurling like shattered prisms, catching sunlight in blinding refractions. Mega Mewtwo Y, they call it in the codexes, but feel the shift. Raw power surges not from arrogance, but harmony. Energy cascades in harmonious loops, amplifying without the corrupting feedback that plagues lesser mega forms. This isn't a borrowed gift from some ancient lore, it's engineered destiny, woven into its genome by creators who foresaw legendary arms races. The air thickens with ozone as it repels the hive's full assault, each blast echoing like thunderclaps over the treetops, buying precious seconds for escape. Yet, for all its nobility, questions claw at the edges. Why hide this masterpiece in Unova's wilds? Did its creators abandon it after perfecting the Mega Trigger, or did it escape like the first, rewriting its purpose in solitude? The forest floor still bears scars, charred roots twisting like accusations, psychic residues lingering in the dew. This Mewtwo vanished into legend after the battle, but its shadow lingers, a reminder that Fuji's flame never truly died. It splintered, igniting new forges across the seas. That shadow deepens when you trace the threads back to Genosect itself, pulling us straight into Chapter 22, the Genosect connection. What unholy pact linked a revived fossil weapon to this cloned savior? And how did their clash rewrite the fate of Unova's hidden guardians? This second Mewtwo, born from a shadowy lab echoing Dr. Fuji's tanks but run by faceless scientists chasing the same forbidden dream, didn't wander alone into the world. It collided headfirst with a force straight out of prehistory, a rampaging army of Genosect. Those sleek, cannon-armed insects pulled from the Earth's forgotten bones. Picture the scene, a sprawling hive in the ruins of an ancient Pokémon preserve, where Team Plasma's engineers unearthed fossilized remains from millions of years past, stitching them back to life with cybernetic upgrades and unyielding programming. These weren't mere clones like Mewtwo's fragile siblings, or the battlefield duplicates from New Island. No, The Genosect were resurrected originals, their DNA scraped from stone and flesh rebuilt cell by cell, only to be twisted into weapons of conquest. The parallel hits like a psychic blast. Mewtwo's own birth mirrors this resurrection down to the core. Dr. Fuji and his successors didn't invent life, they yanked it from the primordial soup, Mew's elusive essence, that ancient wanderer of DNA who predates humanity itself, cloned into a towering fury. Just as the Genosect army awoke in sterile chambers, their compound eyes flickering to life under harsh fluorescent lights, Mewtwo stirred in its nutrient bath, surrounded by the dissolving husks of Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. Both processes defy the natural order, scientists playing archaeologist and god, dragging beings from epochs long buried into a modern nightmare of fluorescent hums, dripping tubes, and cold metal restraints. The Genosect's leaders, programmed with a drive to reclaim a lost paradise, echo Mewtwo's initial rage against creators who saw them as tools, not souls. That shared trauma binds them tighter than any lab alloy. These ancient Pokémon, Genosect included, slumbered through eons of continental drift, ice ages and extinctions, only to be ripped forward by human ambition. Imagine the disorientation, their instincts wired for a world of towering ferns and primal roars, now assaulting senses flooded with skyscrapers, jet contrails, and the acrid tang of pollution. Mewtwo knows this ache intimately. Awakened, fully grown, it gazed upon a planet that had evolved without it. Humans treating Pokémon as pets or prizes, while it grappled with fragmented memories of Mew's wild freedom. The starter clones disintegrated from the shock of synthetic existence. Amber's human echo faded in agony. Even Mewtwo's army from the island storm dissolved when their copied hearts couldn't endure the lie of originality. Genosect fare no better at first, their hive mind fracturing under the weight of cybernetic overrides, lashing out in blind fury at a sky that's all wrong, a sun that burns too harshly on engineered shells. Deep in the storm-swept ruins where their paths cross, the second Mewtwo senses this kinship immediately. It's no coincidence this newer clone intervenes, shielding a lone Genosect from its own kind's onslaught. Both are out of time. Mewtwo, a synthetic echo of an primordial legend, and Genosect, prehistoric warriors rebuilt for a war that ended before mammals walked. Mewtwo sees reflections in their multifaceted eyes, the isolation of being neither fully original nor content as a copy, the betrayal of creators who poured life into vessels then discarded them for failure. This Mewtwo, perhaps haunted by whispers of Fuji's failures or the island clone's fragile peace on Mount Quain, recognizes siblings in these cannon-wielding relics. Why fight alone when you've both been forged in the same crucible of resurrection? It telekinetically halts the army's advance, psychic barriers shimmering like heat haze, buying the vulnerable Genosect moments to flee. In that act, Mewtwo doesn't just aid a stray, it confronts its own displacement, offering the outcast a glimpse of redemption amid the crumbling spires. The Genosect leader, its drive cannon humming with barely contained plasma, pauses under Mewtwo's gaze, algorithms clashing with buried instincts from a forgotten era. Mewtwo communicates not in words but in waves of empathy. Visions of tanks, failed awakenings, a sanctuary plateau where clones like Venusaur and Blastoise finally breathe free. The army hesitates, their synchronized march faltering, as if tasting the same existential vertigo that once drove Mewtwo to summon trainers to New Island. Team Plasma's hubris crumbles here, their revived army turning not on the world but inward, questioning the programming that severed them from their ancient roots. Mewtwo, the elder synthetic, becomes their unlikely guide, steering them toward a new hive, far from human interference, much like it once herded its own duplicates to safety after the Great Erasia. This connection lingers long after the skies clear. Reports from the fringes, whispers among researchers who track legendaries, hint at sightings of Genosect patrolling shadowed coasts, occasionally shadowed by a familiar purple silhouette. The second Mewtwo, unbound by Giovanni's chains or Fuji's grief, finds purpose in these displaced warriors, their shared scars forging an alliance across cloned and revived alike. Trauma doesn't just echo, it evolves, turning lab rejects into guardians of each other's lost timelines. But the story of Mewtwo's duplicates doesn't end with these cinematic echoes from the wilds. In the shadowed panels of the Pokémon Adventures manga, entirely new twists on cloning emerge, variations that twist Fuji's tanks and New Island's machine into bolder, bloodier experiments. Up next in Chapter 23, the manga variations, we'll uncover how Blaine's hidden labs and alternate timelines redefine the clone count forever. You won't believe how many more Mewtwo's the pages hide. While the Genosect army's resurrection mirrored Mewtwo's own tortured birth from synthetic tanks, forcing those ancient Pokémon to confront a world that viewed them as weapons, other corners of Pokémon lore twist this cloning nightmare into even stranger shapes. In the sprawling pages of the Pokémon Adventures manga, known to many as Pokémon Special, the act of cloning doesn't just echo the anime's tragedies, it reimagines them through a web of human ambition and genetic entanglement that binds creator to creation in ways the films never dared. Here, the story of Mewtwo's origin unfolds not in some isolated lab under Giovanni's shadow, but amid the fiery forges of Cinnabar Island, where gym leader Blaine becomes the unlikely architect of the ultimate Pokémon. Blaine, the puzzle master with his scorching beard and labyrinthine gym, pours his own essence into the project, driven by a desperate quest to unlock the secrets of immortality. He's no detached scientist like Fuji. He's a man haunted by his own mortality, experimenting with Mew's elusive DNA, smuggled from the jungles of Guyana. But to stabilize the volatile legendary's genes, Blaine makes a fateful choice. He splices in his own human DNA, weaving strands of his intellect and fire into the clone's very core. This inclusion of Blaine's DNA in the creation of the manga Mewtwo transforms the creature from a pure abomination into something profoundly personal, a biological offspring laced with paternal fire. Mewtwo emerges not just powerful, but intellectually voracious, its psychic storms raging with the same intensity as Blaine's Inferno Badge battles. The manga delves deep into this fusion, showing how the clone inherits not only raw power, but fragments of Blaine's personality, his cryptic riddles echoing in Mewtwo's telepathic taunts, his unquenchable curiosity fueling the clone's rebellion against its origins. It's as if the pages themselves pulse with this forbidden lineage, the air thick with the scent of smouldering labs and bubbling gene vats. As the narrative races through the fire-red and leaf-green arc, this biological link between creator and creation becomes the manga's beating heart. Blaine's DNA doesn't just make Mewtwo viable, it imprints a psychic tether, allowing the gym leader to sense his creation's turmoil from afar, even as Team Rocket schemes to weaponize it. Mewtwo, tormented by visions of Blaine's aging face flickering in its mind, grapples with an identity crisis sharper than any anime clone. Am I a monster born of Mew, or the heir to a human's flawed genius? The manga explores this through brutal confrontations, where Mewtwo unleashes psychic blasts that scorch the earth like Blaine's Arcanine, only to pause, haunted by the echo of a father's unspoken regrets. Picture the panels. Rain-slicked shores of Cinnabar, where red and blue infiltrate Blaine's volcano lair, discovering tanks humming with unstable proto-clones, aborted Bulbasaurs withering under artificial suns, Charmanders flickering out like dying embers. But Mewtwo stands apart, its violet form rippling with stolen human fire, eyes glowing with inherited riddles. Blaine confronts his creation in a clash that shakes the island's core, psychic waves clashing against volcanic fury, forcing Mewtwo to sever the bond that birthed it. Yet the manga lingers on the aftermath, hinting that traces of Blaine's DNA linger in Mewtwo's veins, a perpetual whisper urging evolution beyond mere replication. This take on cloning elevates the Pokémon Adventures manga into a meditation on legacy, where science blurs the line between parent and progeny. Blaine's genetic gamble doesn't end in simple rejection. It sparks Mewtwo's odyssey towards self-definition, purging human taint while embracing its hybrid fury. Clones here aren't disposable failures or soulless armies, they're extensions of the creator's souls, doomed to inherit their rage and wisdom alike. The story ripples outward, influencing Red Zone trials, as if Blaine's fire now burns through an entire generation of trainers. Deep within those inked shadows, the manga poses questions the anime only whispers. What if your maker's blood coursed through your power? What if superiority demanded devouring the very hand that shaped you? Mewtwo's escape from Cinnabar isn't freedom. It's a son's furious exodus, leaving Blaine diminished, his puzzles unsolved. And as we trace these manga threads toward hidden game secrets, you'll want to stick around for Chapter 24, the Let's Go Easter eggs, where forgotten tanks in Cerulean Cave reveal echoes of these very experiments that might just rewrite everything we thought we knew about the clone's true count. While the manga wove Blaine's genetic legacy into Mewtwo's creation, pulling us deeper into alternate threads of this cloning saga, the games themselves hide their own haunting nods to the source material, tucked away in places few trainers ever linger long enough to notice. Deep within Cerulean Cave, that labyrinthine post-game dungeon pulsing with Mewtwo's psychic aura, you'll stumble upon something profoundly unsettling if you venture to its darkest recesses. There, amid the dripping stalactites and echoing drips of underground water, stand 5 cloning tanks, their glass surfaces cracked and fogged by time, suspended in a forgotten chamber like relics from a nightmare that never fully ended. These aren't just set dressing for a super boss encounter, they're deliberate echoes, meticulously designed to transport you straight back to the sterile glow of Dr. Fuji's laboratory in the uncut prologue of Mewtwo Strikes Back. Picture the tanks humming faintly, their nutrient fluids long drained but leaving behind ghostly silhouettes, outlines of forms that twitch in your imagination, suspended between life and dissolution. Let's break them down, one by one, because each tells a story of ambition gone catastrophically wrong. The central tank, largest and most imposing, cradles the vague contour of Mewtwo itself, its embryonic form curled in psychic repose, a reminder that even the pinnacle of cloning success emerged from this fragile genesis. Flanking it are 3 smaller vats, perfectly aligned to evoke the Kanto starters: Bulbasaur 2's bulbous seed pod silhouette, Charmander 2's flickering tail flame etched into the residue, Squirtle 2's shelled form huddled in the murk. And then, off to the side, the 5th tank, the human one, narrower, almost poignant in its delicacy, hinting at Amber's fleeting existence, her cloned consciousness dissolving before it could grasp the world. These tanks aren't random props in Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. They're a direct analysis of the 5 cloning tanks found in the modern Cerulean Cave, positioned right where Mewtwo makes its lair in the games, as if the cave itself swallowed Fuji's lab whole after the escape. Game Freak embedded them here in 2018, a quiet tribute to the anime's 1998 origins, complete with the exact count and configuration from the film. No other clones, no army from the island battle, just these 5 failures, immortalized in pixels to whisper that the past festers beneath the surface of every playthrough. What hits hardest, though, is the implication rippling from these tanks, that the starter clones and Amber might still exist in some form. The glass isn't shattered, the fluids linger in spectral haze. In the game's canon, Cerulean Cave is Mewtwo's sanctuary post-Red's conquest, a place where time bends under legendary influence. Could Mewtwo have salvaged them? Preserved their essences in stasis, defying the deterioration that claimed them in the lab? Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, they perished as infants in the movie, their bodies crumbling to ash on the lab floor. Yet here, tanks intact, their forms implied eternal. And Amber, Fuji's lost daughter, her tank suggesting a consciousness trapped in limbo, waiting for revival tech that Giovanni's empire might one day perfect. This isn't wild speculation. It's the games connecting the game lore back to the original 1998 movie narrative, bridging the anime's tragedy into the core RPG experience. Mewtwo Strikes Back's prologue unfolds in those very tanks, Fuji's dream logs narrating their brief awakenings, the starters gasping for life before fading, Amber's voice echoing in ethereal pleas. Game Freak could have ignored it, but they etched it into Cerulean Cave, letting players like you brush past Mewtwo's origin while hunting shiny encounters. It's as if the cave's psychic barriers preserve the lab's horrors, Mewtwo's way of honoring or tormenting its siblings, keeping their failures alive as a monument to what it overcame. Feel the chill of that preservation. In Let's Go, you battle Mewtwo amid ultra beasts and master trainers, but those tanks lurk nearby, silently questioning, did the starters evolve in secret, their synthetic frailty hardened by cave isolation? Did Amber's clone stabilize under Mewtwo's telekinetic guardianship, a human soul woven into the legendary's hidden society? The movie ends with Mewtwo fleeing, tanks abandoned, but the games relocate them to its new home, implying relocation, not destruction. Fuji's narration haunts. They were born, and then they died. Yet pixels defy that finality, suggesting suspended animation, a digital afterlife where clones persist beyond organic decay. This Easter egg elevates Let's Go from remake to revelation, transforming Pikachu and Eevee's journey into a subtle requiem for the Forgotten Five. Trainers dash through the cave for Mewtwo's capture, oblivious to the tank's glow reflecting off damp walls. But pause there, and the air thickens with unspoken what-ifs. Mewtwo, ever the philosopher of existence, might gaze upon them nightly, pondering souls copied but not duplicated, lives truncated but not erased. It's a thread tying Fuji's hubris to Giovanni's greed, the starter's tragedy to Mewtwo's supremacy, Amber's innocence to the ethical abyss of playing God. As we tally the echoes from Fuji's lab to the cave's depths, the sheer scope demands we confront the numbers head-on. That's where we'll head next in Chapter 25, the total count, a final tally, where every clone, every failed experiment, every surviving shadow gets its reckoning, revealing just how vast this army of copies truly stretches. You won't want to miss pinning it all down. Those 5 cloning tanks hidden deep in Cerulean Cave, glowing faintly with the promise of unfinished experiments, force us to confront a chilling possibility. Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, and even Amber might not have vanished entirely, their essences suspended in some limbo of science gone awry. But if those shadows in the game whisper of persistence, the full ledger of Mewtwo's clones demands we step back and account for every creation, named or nameless, that ever stirred in a tank or emerged from a Mewtwo Ball. Across the anime, the movies, and the fringes of canon, the tally begins with Dr. Fuji's tragic workshop, where ambition birthed 5 distinct lives before most flickered out. Mewtwo itself stands as the pinnacle, cloned from Mew's DNA under Giovanni's ruthless funding, awakening not as a fragile infant, but fully formed, its psychic fury shattering the lab that made it. Then came the Kanto starters, twisted mirrors of the originals, Bulbasaur 2, with its bulb pulsing weakly before collapse, Charmander 2, flames sputtering in a body too brittle to contain them, Squirtle 2, shell cracking under the weight of unstable waters, and Amber, Fuji's desperate bid to reclaim his daughter, her human form dissolving in the tank-like mist, a haunting bridge between Pokémon and people in this godforsaken pursuit. These 5 mark the genesis, raw prototypes where failure wasn't a flaw but the rule, their brief awakenings narrated in Fuji's dream logs as cries against their creator's hubris. Yet Fuji's lab hints at more tanks humming in the background, vats of genetic slurry, suggesting unnamed failures discarded before they could even twitch. The anime's prologue leaves those shadows undefined, prototypes too malformed to name, their DNA recycled into Mewtwo's perfection. That's the first layer. 5 spotlighted souls, 4 lost to instability, 1 rising supreme. Fast forward to New Island, where Mewtwo, scarred by its siblings' graves, turns the knife on the world. In a storm-lashed arena, it seizes Pokémon from 6 elite trainers, Pikachu, Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, and others slipping into those sinister Mewtwo Balls. The cloning machine roars to life, spitting out fully grown duplicates, Pikachu, male and crackling with stolen thunder, Venusaur 2, vines thrashing in blind rage, implied armies of the rest, each a perfect facsimile marked subtly to declare their synthetic birth. Dozens take the field, battling their originals in a symphony of sparks and roars, proving Mewtwo's point that copies could surpass the source. But how many exactly? The film shows waves crashing through the storm, clones overwhelming trainers in numbers that blur the line between squad and horde. 6 trainers mean at least 6 core pairs, yet the chaos implies extras, bake-up Pikachu 2s, flocks of Pidgeot 2s, perhaps even evolutions like Blastwise 2 commanding the tide. Survivors linger into Mewtwo Returns, a peaceful enclave on the island, their ranks thinned but autonomous, no longer pawns. Named ones like Pikachu etch into memory, but the unnamed fill the gaps, ghostly legions dissolved in Mew's clash or scattered to secrecy. Beyond that, canon sprinkles echoes, the second Mewtwo from Genosect and the legend awakened, a leaner shadow cloned by faceless scientists chasing Fuji's blueprint, aiding Genosect not as tyrant but guardian. 2 Mewtwo's now, both successes in survival, yet born from the same flawed dream. Manga whispers of Blaine's DNA weaving into variants, Let's Go's tanks reviving the Origin 5 in Digital Stone, but we stick to the pulsing heart of anime and film, where these threads converge. Now compiling the definitive list of every named and unnamed clone in the franchise pulls these strands into focus. Named Mewtwo, Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, Amber, Pikachu 2, Venusaur 2, and that enigmatic second Mewtwo 8 etched in light and tragedy. Unnamed, Fuji's discarded VATs, perhaps dozens of starter rejects, Mewtwo's full army, swelling past 40 as trainers' teams averaged 5 or 6 each, plus reinforcements for the melee, island remnants in returns, a village of silent duplicates. Cross-reference the visuals, tanks in Cerulean Cave Echo 5, but New Island's machine churns endlessly. Categorizing the failed versus successful generations of clones reveals the fracture lines. First generation, Fuji's, 4 catastrophic failures, starters crumbling hours after birth, Amber unraveling in paternal grief against Mewtwo's triumph, a survivor who rewrote its fate. Second wave, Mewtwo's army, initially successful, mature and mighty, yet doomed by philosophy, most obliterated when Mewtwo saw their soulless mimicry. A handful succeed in redemption, living free under Mewtwo's wing. The Genosect era Mewtwo? Pure success, no siblings to mourn, just quiet power. Failures die young or in cataclysm, successes endure, questioning what makes a clone whole. When you stack the counts, 5 from Fuji, dozens from the machine, outliers like the second Mewtwo, the total surges past 50, maybe 70, each a spark of stolen life. Yet the final number remains a haunting mystery, veiled in animation's haze. No script tallies the Mewtwo Balls precisely, no log counts the tank's overflow. New Island's battle implies an army to match the storm itself, but survivors in returns number vaguely, a community without census. Cerulean Cave teases revival, but are those 5 new clones or echoes? The lore thrives on this ambiguity, a deliberate void where science meets the soul. Did every captured Pokémon yield a twin, or did Mewtwo prune the weak? The exact tally slips away, leaving us with a phantom sum, forever just out of reach. That biological legacy, pulsing through veins both synthetic and true, waits in the shadows of Chapter 26. The biological legacy, what traces of these clones ripple into the wild, altering Pokémon kind forever. Drift deeper with me. With our definitive tally etched in stone, those fragile failures from Fuji's tanks dissolving into memory, the fleeting army from Mewtwo's machine scattered like echoes, and the rare successes like Mewtwo itself standing defiant, a shadow falls over their true endurance. What becomes of clone DNA when the tanks go dark and the battles fade? Does it carry forward, weaving into the Pokémon world's bloodlines, or does it unravel, a genetic dead end engineered by hubris? Consider the starters first, those pitiful Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2 and Squirtle 2, birthed fully grown yet crumbling within moments. Their cells, pieced from Mew's infinite blueprint and twisted through artificial gestation, lacked the resilience of natural birth. No eggs laid, no offspring glimpsed in the logs Fuji left behind. They were prototypes, proof that cloned life could spark but not sustain, their DNA fraying like wet paper under the weight of existence. Mewtwo watched them perish from its own tank, a silent witness to the cost, and in its rage, it vowed superiority, not just in power, but in survival. Mewtwo itself, the pinnacle, roams free across timelines, from New Island storms to Cerulean Cave's depths. Yet even here, the legacy twists. No mate, no lineage traced in the wilds. Legends don't breed like common Pokémon. They emerge singular, eternal. But the army it forged in strikes back. Those Pikachu, Venusaur, and dozens more, cloned from stolen originals in a frenzy of validation. They fought with fury, mirroring their progenitors spark for spark. But when Mew's clash dissolved them into light, did any endure to propagate? Mewtwo returns, whispers of remnants on that forsaken isle, living in quiet herds under its protection, yet no young ones scamper at their heels. No nests, no evolutions passed down. The machine spat out perfect facsimiles, but perfection without posterity. This leads us straight into the heart of the long-term viability of clone DNA in the Pokémon world. Fuji's work, Giovanni's greed, even the shadowy second Mewtwo from Genosect's era, they all hinge on one brutal truth. Cloning accelerates life but accelerates decay. The tanks simulate gestation in hours, what nature grants months or years, compressing DNA repair mechanisms into overload. Mutations creep in, telomeres shorten prematurely, like a flame burning too hot and vanishing too soon. The starter's brief awakenings, eyes flickering with borrowed awareness before shutdown, scream instability. Mewtwo's army, battle-tested yet ephemeral, dissolved not just from energy clash, but inherent fragility, cells rejecting their own blueprint. Theories abound on whether clones can naturally reproduce or if they are sterile, and the lore offers no clean verdict, only tantalizing voids. Pikachu, that fierce male counterpart to Ash's companion, charged with electric might equal to the original. Could it have sired a lineage of Thunderbolt heirs? Venusaur's vines lashed with primal force, might its pollen have fertilized some wild bloom? Yet in the peaceful aftermath of Mewtwo returns, those island survivors graze and slumber without the telltale signs of family. No eggs hatching under watchful eyes, no pods bursting with the next generation. Sterility seems the cruel inheritance, a safeguard against floods of artificial life overwhelming the natural order. Or perhaps not absolute Mew's DNA. The root of it all holds infinite adaptability. Mewtwo clones might carry latent fertility, unlocked only by some unseen catalyst, a psychic bond or environmental trigger echoing their creator's will. Whispers from the games fuel wilder speculation. Those 5 tanks in Let's Go's Cerulean Cave, humming faintly with preserved forms, start as an amber hint at suspended animation, DNA viable yet dormant. Could reactivation yield breeders, stable lines diverging from wild stock? Or would they birth only more ghosts, sterile echoes? The manga's Blaine infusion adds another layer, blending human ingenuity with Pokémon essence, potentially granting hybrid vigor. But canon leans toward barrenness, a thematic echo of Frankenstein's monster, alive, but alone. Then there's the shadow Pokémon connection, that eerie thread pulling cloning into the ethereal. In Colosseum and XD, Cypher doesn't clone flesh, they corrupt hearts, twisting Pokémon into vessels of malice, dark auras, jagged energies, obedience absolute. Are they a form of spiritual cloning? Shadows mirror originals in form and power, yet stripped of soul, reborn through shadow energy rather than tanks. No DNA spliced, but essence duplicated, a psychic photocopy imposed on the living. Mewtwo's clones, too, were soulless at first. Mewtwo deemed them inferior for lacking that vital spark until battle forged it. Shadows awaken to purification, regaining their true selves, much like the clone army's redemption. Is this spiritual cloning the dark twin to Fuji's science? Mewtwo, with its psychic dominion, could theoretically imprint shadows, cloning wills without bodies. The parallels chill. Both projects birth armies to prove dominance. Both grapple with the soul's absence. Cypher's tech, drawing from ancient relics, might even trace to Mew's fossilized whims, a non-biological legacy where clone DNA evolves into clone spirits. Ponder the second Mewtwo from Genosect, heroic and distinct, aiding fossil revivals. Its DNA, fresh from another lab, intermingles with Genosect's paleotech. Could such crossings yield fertile hybrids, bridging clone and ancient? Or does sterility persist, dooming all to solitude? The Pokémon world teems with reproduction, eggs in every root, herds thundering across plains, yet clones stand apart, their legacy written in extinction's ink. These biological fractures ripple outward, shaping not just cells but stories, myths, and obsessions that grip fans across generations. Up next, Chapter 27, The Cultural Impact of Mewtwo's Lore, uncovers how these clone shadows infiltrated games, anime, merchandise, and beyond real-world phenomena, born from fictional tanks that might just keep you awake, pondering your own origins. Even as we ponder those haunting questions about clone DNA, whether Mewtwo's creations could ever pass on their fragile legacies, or if they're doomed to sterility forever, the true power of this story lies in how it seeped into the soul of Pokémon itself. Mewtwo wasn't just another legendary Pokémon bursting onto the scene with raw power. It arrived carrying the weight of forbidden science, forcing the franchise to confront shadows it had barely hinted at before. Think back to the early days when Pokémon was still finding its feet as this bright, badge-collecting adventure for kids. Gym battles, cute companions, a world where every Pokémon dreamed of the spotlight. Then came the cloning arc, shattering that innocence like glass under psychic pressure. Dr. Fuji's tanks, glowing with eerie blue light, birthed not triumphs but tragedies. Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, each one flickering to life only to dissolve back into nutrient fluid, their tiny forms convulsing in silent agony. And Amber, that heartbreaking human echo, her face pressed against the glass as consciousness slipped away. This wasn't filler backstory. It was a deliberate plunge into mortality, ethics, and the arrogance of creation, themes that pulsed through the veins of the first movie and redefined what Pokémon could say. How the cloning arc defined the darker themes of the early Pokémon franchise, turning a tale of friendship into a meditation on loss, identity, and the cost of playing God. Suddenly, capturing Pokémon felt loaded, trainers complicit in a cycle of control that mirrored Mewtwo's rage. Mewtwo itself emerged from those failures not as a monster to slay, but as a mirror held up to humanity's flaws. Born fully formed, its mind a storm of fragmented memories from Fuji's dream logs. It lashed out at a world that saw it as a weapon. Giovanni's cold funding, the sterile labs humming with machinery that mimicked life but stole souls. This was Mewtwo's cradle, yet watch it evolve. In the storm-lashed arena of New Island, it forges its clone army from stolen Pokémon, Pikachu crackling with borrowed electricity, Venusaur looming with vines that twist like veins. The battle isn't just psychic blasts and hyper beams, it's a philosophical clash. Clones versus originals, copies screaming for purpose. When Mew arrives, small and unyielding, Mewtwo glimpses its own reflection, not superior, but equal, flawed, alive. The clones dissolve in that cataclysmic light, but Mewtwo survives changed, retreating to hidden islands, protecting remnants in Mewtwo Returns. This is the legacy of Mewtwo as a tragic hero, rather than a simple villain, a being who questions its existence so profoundly that it redeems itself through mercy, echoing Frankenstein's creature or Blade Runner's replicants, but wrapped in Pokémon's deceptively simple shell. That resonance didn't fade with the credits. Fans latched onto it because it spoke to something primal. Why the story of the clones continues to resonate with fans decades later lies in its unflinching honesty amid the franchise's candy-coated expansion. As Pokémon ballooned into games, cards, and endless sequels, Mewtwo's arc became the dark heart fans returned to. The anime specials, the manga twists with Blaine's DNA infusions, even the subtle nods in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, where Cerulean Cave hides those 5 ghostly tanks, whispering that the starters and Amber might linger in limbo. The second Mewtwo in Genosect and the Legend Awakened doubles down, a heroic clone aiding ancient fossils revived by science, blurring lines between creator and created. Conventions buzz with cosplayers debating clone souls. Fan theories dissect if those island survivors in Mewtwo Returns could breed true, tying back to our sterility talks. It's endured because it humanizes the inhuman, makes you ache for Pikachu's spark fading, for Mewtwo's lonely psychic calls across oceans. In a series about bonds, this lore asks, what if your partner was made, not born? What if you were? Communities still pore over fan arts of Fuji's logs, remixing the prologue's narration into ambient tracks for late-night lore dives. It's influenced everything from creepypasta like Lost Silver to scholarly papers on bioethics in media. Mewtwo's clones aren't footnotes, they're the franchise's conscience, proving Pokémon could handle grief without losing its wonder. And as we stand at this crossroads of creation and Erasia, wondering what fate awaits these echoes in the wilds beyond our sight, join me next in Chapter 28, Final Rest, the Clone's Future, where we uncover the chilling possibilities of their ultimate end. Or rebirth. But Mewtwo's story doesn't fade into myth with those early shadows of creation. It lingers in the high, unforgiving peaks of Mount Quain, where the last echoes of that clone army found their fragile sanctuary. Those survivors from the storm-swept arena of New Island, Pikachu, the Venusaur 2 lineage, and dozens more who withstood the clash of legends, they didn't dissolve into nothingness like their fallen kin. No, Mewtwo carried them away to that remote crag, shrouded in eternal mist, far from Giovanni's grasp and humanity's prying eyes. Picture the ascent, if you can feel it through the words, Mewtwo's psychic aura enveloping the weary forms, lifting them across churning seas to Quain's jagged throne. There, in crevices carved by ancient glaciers, they took root. Caves warmed by geothermal vents became their dens, wild berries and mountain streams their sustenance. Mewtwo stood sentinel, its form a silhouette against lightning-veined skies, warding off poachers in the special that followed the great battle. One raid after another, Team Rocket's drones, greedy collectors with nets and tranquilizers, they shattered against Mewtwo's barriers, leaving the clones untouched. In the current timeline, that peace holds. No new canon has pierced Quain's veil since Mewtwo Returns aired those 20 years ago. The survivors thrive in seclusion, evolving perhaps, intermingling with wild Pokémon, or even among themselves. Pikachu, that fierce mirror of Ash's companion, leads hunts through snowfields, its cheeks sparking warnings to intruders. The evolutions, Blastoise 2, Charizard 2 patrol the heights, their roars blending with avalanches. They number maybe 24, the resilient core who endured Mew's primal pulse, their bodies marked faintly purple, a badge of their artificial dawn. Mewtwo wanders among them still, or did last we saw, mentoring, protecting, a parent to these echoes of stolen souls. Yet this final rest raises the deepest rift in all the lore. What separates a clone from its original? Mewtwo once thundered that clones lacked true souls, mere vessels programmed for obedience, dissolving when their purpose frayed. In the arena's fury, Pikachu struck Pikachu, and the clone crumpled, whispering of emptiness before fading to sludge. That moment shattered Mewtwo's pride, revealing the hollow core of replication. But on Quain, something shifted. These survivors stirred with will, chose loyalty over command, formed bonds beyond code. Do they possess souls now, forged in adversity? Or are souls not bestowed at birth, but earned through choice, through pain? Consider the human parallel, Amber's ghostly form in Fuji's tanks, a girl cloned from sorrow, her eyes fluttering open only to dim forever. Was she alive? The Pokémon world blurs that line relentlessly. Mewtwo itself, born from Mew's essence twisted by science, claims supremacy, yet weeps for its siblings, Bulbasaur 2, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, those fragile starters who gasped once and withered. They were life, however brief, pulsing with potential before hubris snuffed them. Life then defies definition, not in DNA's helix or a heartbeat's rhythm, but in awareness, in the spark that defies its cage. Armored Mewtwo, the second born from Mew's lash and Genosect's tail, embodies this further. Cloned anew, heroic where the first raged, it vanished into legend after aiding its foes. Does it roam with Quain's flock, or carve its own path? The lineage traces back cleanly now, Fuji's 5 tragedies birthing one transcendent Mewtwo. That Mewtwo's machine spawning scores for war, most lost but a remnant saved. The rogue second Mewtwo, outlier eternal. 15 named souls at minimum, Bulbasaur 2 through Amber, Pikachu 2's host, the starter's echoes, the army's ghosts, yet the true tally swells into hundreds if you count the unnamed fodder of that island storm. Failures taught supremacy, survivors whisper equality. This closes our descent into the tank's glow and the clone's silent screams. Mewtwo's arc, from vengeful god to guardian, redefines not just Pokemon's shadows, but our own grasp on creation's edge. What lives in a copy? What endures when the original fades? The clones rest, but their questions echo on. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.